Okay, we can start the track number 2. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Andrea Dresseno and I'm the president of the Italian video game program. Our association goal is to facilitate the production of video games set in Italy or related to Italian culture. So that's why I'm here as a curator for this track. I will be quick so I can give the floor to Florent. This track discusses several case studies that combine video games and territory, with special attention to historical narration and or local tradition. So we are focusing on different video games that deals with these themes. And first of all, I want to thank you, Video Game Without Borders, for inviting us to this event, because it's very interesting to create a network with different associations and realities across Europe. But I'd like to start with our first guest today. And we have here with us from Morang. I hope my French pronunciation was
very good.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to introduce your lecture. I'm going to read the English version because I don't speak Spanish. So the title of your lecture is Rethinking Our Position as Creators, a Lesson Learned from Inua. And this presentation explores how collaboration with the Inuit artists and elders guided us in reshaping our game project. Through this process, we worked to create a respectful experience that reflects both Inuit culture and our own identity as creators. Just a little presentation of you. Florent Morin graduated from Lille's journalism school in France in 2002. And worked as a journalist for 10 years. He then founded the Pixelant, a game dev studio with a focus on reality-inspired games. Before working on Inua, a story in ice and time, co-produced with Ico and Arte, and The Wreck, the Pixelant co-produced Bury Me My Love with Figs and Arte. And I also want to say that I often use Bury Me My Love in schools when I went to teach, because it's a nice example of video game that can be helpful for students and teachers as well. So thank you for being
Thank you.
here. And the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. This is not the right version of the presentation, but it's pas grave. I had new slides and cool images, but I guess we're going to do without it. This is me. I was already presented, and this is a trailer for the game we are going to talk about today, Inua, A Story in Ice and Time. But how to launch it, I guess, no. I'm sorry, I don't understand what's going on. How do I launch the video, like on the previous slide? Yeah, thank you. And there's sound also on the video. There should be at least. Okay. It's less convincing without the sound, but basically, this game was initially inspired by the story of the Captain Sir John Franklin, who was a captain from the British Navy in the middle of the 19th century, and who decided to leave England in order to find the Northwest Passage between England and between the Canada and the North Pole, basically. And there was two boats on this journey, the Erebus and the Terror, and they disappeared in 1948. And nobody knows exactly what happened. This is a semi-famous story, especially if you've seen the TV show The Terror, that tries to explain this story with fiction. And this is a story that was a big inspiration to two creators who contacted us with another story of fiction that they elaborated on the real story of the Captain John Franklin. And they are here. This is John Franklin. He was pretty stylish, but he still died. Sorry. And and this is Nathalie and Frédéric. So they contacted ICO. ICO is initially an audiovisual production company. They contacted Igal Cohen from ICO with a movie, project. They wanted to make a movie. But it was very complicated to make this movie because the pitch that they had was fairly complicated. So Igal proposed to them to turn that project into a video game project. And that's when the Pixelant came on board, and that's when I was part of the project. It then became a co-production with Arte France. Arte is a French-German TV channel that has been investing in video game projects for 10 years now. And they are very good partners, and usually they sign games that you would never convince any conventional publishers to sign. So it was a very nice scenario. It was happening in the far north, so remote land. It was involving stories of a meeting between the Franklin expedition and Inuit people. And personally, I would never have gone with such a project because I'm not an Inuit. At the time, I barely didn't know anything about the Inuit community and the story of that people. But Nathalie and Frédéric had done a lot of work on the topic. They even started learning Inuktitut, which is the language of the Inuit people. And they were very adamant that there was a story to be told there, and they wanted to tell a story that would be inspired by Inuit mythology. I'm sorry, I'm a little troubled because it's not the same presentation I have, so I have to adjust. So I agreed to work on that, but working on our previous project, and more specifically on Bury Me My Love, I developed what I call an ethics of reality-inspired games. To me, when you want to work on a game that's inspired by the real world and real cultures and real people, you have to follow certain steps so that you can actually do your work properly. The first step is to document yourself as much as you can, because you don't know everything about everything, and there's lots of things to learn, and if you want to talk about something you don't know respectfully, you first have to do your homework. The second one is to listen to the people who are directly involved, and to really listen to them, because you might learn things that you don't initially expect, and that's exactly what happened to us. The third one is to be transparent about who you are. In our case, we were a team of white men and women living in France and having nothing to do culturally with the place we were in when we were working on the game. And the next part, the last part, is you have to be clear about what you want to do. And this is generally the point that happens in the process. In the process of making the game, you happily discover what you are actually making. And that's exactly what happened to us and what I will tell you about today. So, about the documentation. First, we had to read books. And you see that we read books, very serious books, such as To Be and To Be Reborn by Bernard Saladin d'Anglure, who is a French specialist of Inuit people. So ethnology books, history books, but also children's books, and more specifically this one is written by Monica, and Monica is an elder, so she's a very respected person in the Inuit community, and she has a lot of different activities, but one of them is writing children's books. And as we were kind of children's in discovering the reality of the Inuit people, I thought it would be a cool door to enter that culture, to be able to read the books she wrote as an author. We also watched movies. So, for instance, the movie in the top corner is called Before Tomorrow, and it's been produced by Inuit production company. It's by Marie-Hélène Cousineau and Madeleine Puyug, and it was very interesting to see a work of fiction that was made in the 21st century, to get to know what Inuit people produce in terms of cultural things and movies, for instance. But the one in the bottom was a little different. It's called Nanook of the North, and it's a docu-fiction, so it's half a documentary and half a fiction. It was shot in 1922, and it was shot by a team of Occidental people, so people from Canada who went up north and who shot the movie. And what was really interesting in that, judging with 1 century of looking back at something that was made 1 century ago, was to analyze what was interesting and what was clearly wrong in the way the Inuit community was depicted. We also interviewed with people, for instance, Lucy Turiogalyuk, who, sorry, I forgot to click here, yes, who is the executive director of the Nunavut Independent Television Network. So she's also a TV producer, but she's of course very aware of her community's culture and of its reality of the everyday life. And we also met with artists, for instance, Billy Gauthier, who is an Inuit artist from Nunavik, so it's the most eastern part of northern Canada, who met with our authors, Frédéric and Nathalie, in order to exchange about his creativity, about his process, about his relationship with nature and the wilderness. And we also met with people, because as I mentioned, the ethics of reality-inspired games impose you to meet with people, actually, because you can read a lot of things and watch a lot of documentaries and hear a lot of podcasts, but if you actually meet with people, you will get a completely different sense of what you are talking about. So, for instance, the video production company called Arnite, who works in Inuit territory for 20 plus years now, and who taught us a lot of things about what it means to live in those territories, and what are the cultures, what are myths, what are the relationships with the nature, and lots of things that were really interesting. We also got in touch with Tanya Tagak. Tanya Tagak is a throat singer. Throat singing is a very traditional way of singing for the Inuit people. And what was really interesting is when we tried to connect with Tanya Tagak, it's the first time we understood that there was something here that we had to be careful about. Because we sent an email to Tanya talking about Inuit Story in Ice and Time, and talking about the project of the game, what we wanted it to be about, what were our values, and that we wanted to use some of her music to put in the game in order to have a soundtrack for the game. And the first thing that she answered was, is there any Inuit member in the team? And we answered, no, not at the moment, because it was very, very early in the process. And starting there, she was like, I'm not interested in working with you. And I think that it shows something that we discovered later, is how important it is for the Inuit people to preserve their culture and to fight for it, and to be sure that the traumas of the past will not be lived through again. And those traumas we discovered later in the process. So one of the moments where we started understanding that is when we met with elders. So as I said, eminent members of the community. And Monica is the first elder that we met, and we had long conversations with her. It was a little bit technical because she lives in northern Nunavut and the internet is pretty bad. So sometimes we had to talk and not be sure that we would be heard, but in a nutshell, we were able to talk for a long time with her. She told her about her family, about a story that were just going around in her circle, and about the life in the Great North, basically. And she answered all of her questions about representation, about what it meant for the Inuit people to talk about spirits, to talk about ghosts, to talk about lots of things that we read in books, but we didn't really know what to make of. And Billy Gauthier, the artist that I mentioned, he came to France. We made him fly to France, and he spent 1 week with the two artists, the two authors, donc Frédéric and Nathalie, and they just spent 1 week hanging around when he would visit an art exhibit with them, and they would just chat in the evening and just like get to know each other. And I think it allowed them to understand that it was important to really dig deep into the fact that they were not Inuit and that we were not making an Inuit game. We were making the game that we Europeans, we French people with our past, were projecting on the Inuit culture. And that's when it started shiftings in our head. We also met with a game designer, Thomasier, who actually worked with us on the game, who worked on writing a story for us, a tale for us that is included in the game and that works as a series of panels that bind the levels together, and actors and actresses and a lot of people. I'm getting faster because I'm not going to have the time to... Yes, this is a video too, please. And this is very important. So could you pause it, please? It would be very great to have the sound, because without the sound, this video is not as interesting. But if it's not possible anyway, I will try to, maybe I can try to play it here. Let's hack the whole thing. Sorry? Great. They were frightened that I would put the microphone next to my computer and press play here. So, technically terrifying, so. Yeah. This is before that. Yeah, in between, yeah. No. It's the black slide. Yeah. This is a video, actually. It's a bit tricky, I know. I wish I could do the sound track of this video, but I am absolutely unable to do that. I can try. So this is Laurentio. It's one of the 15 voice actors and actresses that we had in our games in order to be able to voice the actual Inuit people. And it was really amazing for us to have this collab with them when we recorded them, because they would come up with lots of comments on the story and the direction it was going in and what was surprising to them and what felt completely what was connecting with them, and that was a really great moment. But all those people we met and people we listened to made us ask ourselves a question that they asked ourselves, and this question is, what is your game about? Initially, Nathalie and Fred, they wanted to make a game that's happening in the far north because they wanted to because they fantasized a little bit about the wilderness, about the brave man fighting the cold and fighting the snow and fighting the birds. And this talked to them on a deep level, and they wanted to make a beautiful story about it, but it wasn't their story. It was a story that they projected with their imagination and whatnot. And the Inuit people we met were a little bit wary about that. They were first wary of cultural appropriation, because of course they thought we should be the people talking about our culture. We should be talking about what we know intimately and what we've grown with and what is part of our culture. And in the past, there have been a lot of misrepresentation of the Inuit culture, so they didn't want that to continue. They also were very wary of the history, in air quotes, as told by the winners. Because when we told them, oh, we want to make a game that's starting with the Franklin expedition, Monica, our elder, I saw the despair on her face because she told us, I can't deal with the Franklin expedition anymore because this is a founding myth of Canada, and we are under the impression that the northern part of Canada started existing with the Franklin expedition. It has been populated for over 4,000 years by Inuit. And so this story is a gateway to the general story of the northern Canada. But for us, it's also a symbol of history as told by the Canadian government, because also the Franklin expedition story is part of the Canadian national myth. And so it's something they were a little worried about and not very interested in working on a project that would talk about that from a purely historical point of view. Another point is that they feared not to be listened to, and I put again in parentheses, because there is historical proof that the people on board the Erebus and the Terror met with the Inuit. And because of racism, because of prejudice, they didn't listen to the Inuit people, and that's one of the reasons that might explain why they died and why they weren't able to rejoin the southern part of the continent. And in 2014, when archaeological mission was looking for the shipwrecks of the Erebus and the Terror, there's actually one Inuit fisherman who said, I saw a pole sticking from the ice in that location. And nobody wanted to listen to him. Like the archaeologists said, no, it is at least 1,000 kilometers north from that spot. So they looked where they thought the boat would be, and they didn't find them. And then 2 years later, they looked where he said, and they found them. So once again, they were afraid of not being listened to, and their point of view not being taken into consideration. And of course, there's the trauma. As you may or may not know, there's a very tumultuous, to say the least, relationship between the Inuit community and the rest of Canada. And the schools in which the Inuit communities have been forced to go, and lots of Inuit children have died because they were mistreated, because they were barely fed, because they were just like subject to violent treatments. Those are things that they didn't want. That made them wary of not being properly treated in a collaboration with people from outside their community. So we ask ourselves all questions. What game can we make as a bunch of French people? What do we know? And what is it deeply that actually made us think about making a game in this setting to begin with? And Nathalie and Fred realized that the common ground to the three protagonists of the game, because I didn't mention it, but there's three different protagonists living in three different time periods. One is living during the 19th century with the Franklin expedition. Another one is living in the 50s, trying to find the trace of a weird meteor that might or might not be a Russian nuclear missile. And one is a journalist living in 2016 and investigating on the shipwreck of the Erebus. And the three persons, the common denominator was that they didn't want to listen. They wanted to dominate. They wanted to be part of something. They wanted to be invested in a mission. They wanted glory, but they didn't want to listen. So we thought, what we really want to do with this game is to make a legend for our people, from the people who are not Inuit and who are not able to understand the Inuit legends because they are not connected to the Inuit culture. And so what is a legend? A legend is unchanged, and it has to have fantastical elements. It has to be passed down orally. It has to be rooted in a cultural context, and it may be misunderstood. You may not understood properly what the legend is trying to tell you. It speaks of higher powers, and it warns. It has a warning role. And that's how we designed our game and we rewrote our story in order to turn it into a legend for the people who are not from Inuit descent, who are not part of the Inuit community. And so it became a game in which you would have a tale that would tell you the story on Nanurluk. So Nanurluk is actually a huge polar bear who is a mythical polar bear who has a relationship with nature. And we asked Thomas Ye Monjikok, the Inuit game designer, to write us a 6-steps story of Nanurluk. And in between those moments of storytelling, you have the game in which you have to try to reach the center of a place that resonates with strange energy. So even if you play in the 19th century, in the 20th century, or in the 21st century, the 3 protagonists, they share the same goal. They are drawn to reaching a place that seems to reek with weird and wonderful and magic mystery. And everybody, like the whole Inuit community that you meet in the game, they warn you against it. They warn you not to go there. They warn you to stop. They warn you to challenge your beliefs and your desires and your appetite for the unknown, and because they know what it's about and you don't. And we thought it was interesting for us to put the players in the shoes of the force that keeps pushing those characters forward. So the player is the legend. The player is the force that pushes the characters towards the point where they are not supposed to be and they are not supposed to go. The player is actively working against warnings and working for the character's demise. And it resonates with the Inuit tale of Nanurluk, who lost 3 baby bears and who needs vengeance, needs revenge. But every Inuit people knows that Nanurluk needs revenge, so they don't go to the point where the revenge may happen. And the three Western characters, they don't know that and they don't want to listen. And you as a player, of course, you can listen and you can realize that you shouldn't do what you're doing, but the language of the game kind of forces you and challenges you to go forward. In a word, Inua is about colonialism. Inua is about the relationship between the Western people and the colonized people, the native people who were often victims of racism, who were not listened to, who were treated violently, if not exterminated. And there's a reason for the fact that on the game's key art, Nanurluk is standing on a pile of bones, because actually this came down to one of the very first reasons why Nathalie and Fred wanted to work on this. It's because they learned that when the first people arrived and colonized and got in contact with America from Europe, they introduced diseases. And without their knowledge, there's a historical theory that says that maybe diseases have spread so widely that even to the north of Canada, lots of people have died from the diseases that were imported by those 2 or 3 different sailing ships. So, in a nutshell, this very first reason why Nathalie and Fred wanted to work on this project is actually reflected in the end game, even though it has gone through a complete transformation due to our relationship and our discussion and our contact with the Inuit people. So in the end, we didn't lose ourselves. We didn't lose what we wanted to do. We just refined it and understood it better and hopefully came up with a game that's more respectful and also more personal and intimate. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry, I was a little bit troubled by the presentation, but that's okay. If you have any questions, I don't know if you have time for questions.
Thank you. Oh. I have a question, but maybe we can give maybe I can start with a question, then we can ask the public if... there's an interesting thing you said in your abstract, respectful experience, and I also worked on a game related to the Italian history and folklore, and it's set in Sud Tyrol, so the northern region in Italy, where in the past it was a German region, and then fascism arrived and imposed the Italian culture over the German one. And when we started doing that game, it was interesting because they were afraid that we could make something disrespectful, also because they are still suffering from the fact that their town was, there was a lake, the town was destroyed. Now today there's a church bell emerging from the lake, it's called Curon. And so, regarding your work with Inua, I think that when you work with living people, so you tell them their story, is always a matter of balancing when you create the game, in the game design, the narrative, so balancing the teams, how you narrate their histories. It's not easy when you have to speak with living people, to respect their story, to learn how they feel about their history and about their tradition. Could you tell us more about your work, this balancing work? Maybe you have the same experience with Inua.
Yes, what I found very interesting is that when we spoke with Monica and with Billy and with basically with everyone, nobody was shy of telling us their culture and their story and their myth and their legends, and nobody was adopting the stance, oh, I don't want to share it with you because I want to protect it. I don't want you to know more about it because you will stain it, you will taint it in a way. On the contrary, they were super adamant in sharing their story and their myth. And for instance, Monica told us a story about her uncle who had disappeared for 10 months and nobody knew, and he came back and he said that he became a bear, and he was invested with paranormal powers. And then we asked her, but do you believe in that? And she was like, this is a weird question. It's not important if I believe in it. It's a story that exists and that is part of the... And so it was really great to be able to just bath into a completely different culture. But should we have decided to try to replicate that culture and show that culture, that would have been where we could have been into dangerous territories. Because it's still, no matter how well you try to document and just talk to people, you're still not Inuit. I'm still not Inuit at all. And so it's just a question of, as I mentioned, really knowing what you are doing and why you are doing it and what you want to try to achieve. And I think it's more interesting for us that Inua is about colonialism, that it is about Inuit folklore, because we are not Inuit.
Okay, thank you. Is there any question from the public? Is coming. I don't want to.
I don't have translation. I don't have the.
Do you have some translation for?
I don't have the translation.
I can
sorry.
speak you to. Yeah, well, I can speak in English, but okay. Don't worry. So congrats for the game.
Thank you.
It looks nice, and I wanted first to ask you, how did you translate all this research about the Inuit people that you made with the development of the game? But you answer at the end of the presentation. And how did you translate all this research into the gameplay aesthetic of the video game? But as I said, you answered that. And now I wanted to ask you if in that approach to the Inuit people, you talk them about the previous video game I know about the Inuit people, Never Alone. Mm-hmm. So did you take some notes, or did you study this game, maybe to not repeat this, I don't know how to say it, like basic gameplay for telling a legacy story about a culture, did you take some notes about that game for making your own, about the Inuit people?
Yes, a little bit, because there are not that many games that happen in Inuit territory anyway, in Nunavut and Nunavik. So, of course, we did our due diligence and we saw that game among a couple, 3 or 4 of them. And for me, Never Alone, when I played it, I thought 2 things. The first one is that the gameplay is very nice and cool, but it's very gamey, in big air quotes. It's very efficient and it works really well, and I think that the game has had very positive feedback, even on the gameplay side of it alone. So that's really cool, but that's definitely not what we wanted to do, because that's not the Pixel Hunt doesn't do games that are very gameplay centric. And also, so I tried to learn a little bit more about Never Alone, and what I learned is that even though the original idea didn't come from the Inuit, there has been a lot of time and effort invested in producing parts of the game in Nunavut with Inuit teams. And so, in my understanding, their will to try to just depict life in the Great North as is was more legitimate than ours would have been, because we were not in the same situation. So, pretty rapidly, we left that as a simple reference and stopped comparing ourselves to them, because for me, we didn't have the same approach.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello. First of all, the art style is amazing.
Thank you.
I just want to ask, is there any specific reason why you chose that art style and that visual narrative for the game? Like, is why you didn't, for example, went to the other approach, like RPG or another types of visual narrative? Thanks.
Okay, so for the gameplay perspective, the fact that we turned the game into a puzzle game in which you had to jump from one moment in time to another one, so from the 19th century to modern day, and when you change something in the past, it affects the future, but also later in the game, when you change something in the future, it also changes the past, so it goes both ways. This is a clear attempt from us to represent the fact that for Nanolook, time is not important, because Nanolook is always an eternal, and he doesn't care about time passing. Time is a Western construct, to put it very quickly. So this is how we try to say something with the gameplay that would align with the story we wanted to tell. And about the art style, well, there's 2 ways to answer your question. The first one, the pragmatic one, is that we really didn't have a lot of money to make that game, so we needed to go with a low poly style that would be pretty cheap. Sorry? Yes, it's a 3D game. Yeah, I think you can see in some GIFs that I put. Well, it doesn't work anymore, but yes. So that's the thing. We try to. So Delphine Fourneau, who is yes. So if you see, this is 3D actually. So it's just it was easier for us to go with 3D to manipulate space and time in the way that we wanted. But so Delphine Fourneau, who is the art director and who basically made the whole art, because in an indie team, when you're an art director, you're often doing everything. She documented also visually a lot, and she tried to go with all the general style was for that matters directly inspired by Inuit art. We also worked with Billy Gauthier, the artist from Nunavik, to consult with us to get a look and feel that would be coherent with the game world.
After you, no. I was secretly hoping you would go. Hi, congratulations, amazing presentation.
Thank you.
And it was also like really marveling to see how you sort of started this process and then you entered this process, like this double process of like self-reflexivity and sort of figuring out where you were wrong. And then, but I mean, you kind of alluded that you guys didn't have a lot of money to make this game.
Yes.
And my question is also related to finances, actually. It's sort of like a two-in-one question, actually. One is, having this game is amazing because you know, have a different perspective of history, one that is very necessary. But what exactly, is there a financial benefit to these communities from these games?
Yeah, sure.
And also my question included in that is, you said how you spoke to like an elder, like very extensively, right? And she sort of, and multiple people, and she sort of told you the stories and stuff like that. And again, was there like a degree of financial compensation? Because,
of course. Yeah, everybody who worked on the game, and more specifically, everybody from Nunavut who worked on the game was paid. The actors and actresses were paid. Sorry?
No, I said amazing.
Ah, okay. And Monica was paid for consultancy and knowledge, and it was important for us. The only thing is that we also considered having parts of the profits of the game to be redistributed in some way. Sadly, there's no profits of the game, so it's not really open for debate.
So it was almost the same question. So thank you so much. Yeah,
You're definitely connected.
Very better put in English. Voilà, voilà. But yeah, I was about to ask. Well, really, I wouldn't have said better. Now, my question was. So you said that you work with one game developer.
Yes, a game designer. Yes.
Game designer.
Thomas Jemanjok.
I was also wondering, like, how it could get back to the community if you, I don't know, made like workshops, and if there was like a game workshop.
So there were two people from the team who were living in Canada, but they were living in Montreal. They were not living in Nunavut. And we tried, we considered going there to be able to have workshops and conversations on site. And it was the costs of going to that specific, Monica's specific community was like 10 or 15,000 euros, which is a big chunk of our budget. So sadly, we had to do everything online, but the connection, the internet connection is very bad, and so it was very complicated to organize anything else than just chats. So we had chats with the community, but we couldn't do anything more that would require more intricate organization, sadly. But maybe one day, who knows? Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Florent, for your lecture. So, applaud. Okay. Thank you again. I'm staying here to invite the next lecturer. I could invite you in Italian, but I think that no one can. So, Claudia Molinari from We Are Muesli, and she's a very, I don't know. You are an artist, I can say. You are also an artist because. Are you ready? Anyway, I'm going to introduce you, so you could just have to push the.
I think it's. Oh yes.
Okay, that's okay. Claudia Molinari works for We Are Muesli with Matteo Pozzi, and this is the title of her lecture, From Heritage to Games: We Are Muesli's Approach to Applied Games. This is the abstract. Can cultural heritage be playful? Yes, this is the answer. Every heritage needs the right game format. We Are Muesli, an independent studio, uses games, video games, and escape rooms to connect people with collective histories and memories. And I'm also going to read your bio. To the artist, illustrator, and visual storyteller, Claudia is co-founder and producer at indie game studio We Are Muesli. Through her projects, talks, teaching, and curatorial work, she promotes cultural heritage and diversity in gaming, currently working on In Their Shoes, a collection of 49 slice of life interactive stories set in a diverse, contrasting city like present-day Milan. So,
Fantastic.
thank you.
Wow.
I give the floor to you, and thank you.
Okay, that's very weird because I never had this type of setup and it's very difficult. So, Florent, I don't know how you made it. So, let's start. Well, of course, you know this answer. The culture can be playful, but first, let me ask you a question. Actually, a few questions. Would you climb a mountain in slippers? Or would you swim in the summer with a coat on? Or even would you jump out of a plane with a backpack? Well, of course, all those images have been taken from ChatGPT. I've created it because I couldn't find them on Google. And I do apologize, and I'm sure, and I hope actually that all the other slides will be better. But just as each context needs the right clothing, so each cultural heritage needs the right game format. And why am I saying so? Sorry. This is not the right presentation. I'm having nightmares now. Okay, never mind. I'm gonna sit here and watch the screen over there and moving this a little bit like this so I can read. Okay. So why am I saying so? It's because the majority of applied games, the majority of cultural institutions, they use video games just like a quick fix. We have a problem, let's use a video game so we can improve, we don't know what. Improve something. Games are cool, games are fashionable, but this is not the right way to do so. So can cultural heritage be playful? The answer is yes, but there is a big but. I'm really sorry because this is not the right presentation and I'm not sure what is going to go after. But when we think about games, we have two clusters in mind. We have digital games and we have analog games. Most of the digital games are video games, and most of the analog games are board games. But what we also have in mind is that those games most of the time offers entertainment without really thinking about their cultural impact. They mostly are enjoyed in a domestic environment, and they are designed with a commercial scope. And this is, for me, the most critical aspect about social impact games. The fact that the majority of the scopes of games is commercial. So, cultural heritage requires a very unique approach, which is based on social impact, and it's a case-by-case approach. So when we think about social impact, we need to think about games that focus on creating an impactful cultural experience, which should be experienced to best enhance first the heritage, not the audience. We need to think about the heritage first, and then we need to think about who needs to benefit from all the strategy that we are making to make the games. And most important aspect is that when we design a game with a cultural impact and social impact aspect, we could have a specific scope in mind that could be commercial, but we need to start thinking that can also be non-commercial. Just like we have art exhibitions that are free and we can enter in a museum and enjoy the experience, we should start to think about that there could be experiences that could be free, which doesn't mean that who makes the game doesn't get money. So the first things that we have to think about is that without a clear purpose, creating a social impact game is very challenging. And this is me, and this is my partner. Matteo is the game director of We Are Muesli. We Are Muesli is an unconventional game studio. We say so because, first of all, we are a social enterprise, which means that we are a non-profit industry. Sorry, not industry, non-profit business. And we are born in this kind of assessment because our scope is to make games with a social impact. Since 2013, we have been creating games for cultural heritage through digital, analog, and hybrid experiences. And we talk about stories, places, art, memories. This is going too fast. We hope to promote actually, positive thinking, inclusive and conscious gaming. And we do it in diverse things, like we do workshop, we teach, we make games, and we also curate events. We also lately, we started to localize games because it is important to preserve the author intent and also the culture experience that you want to localize the language to. So going back to that distinction between digital games and analog games, we have a different one. We never start designing with a game format in mind. We think about that there is a connection between digital and analog, and there are a lot of hybrid experiences in between the two. So the design process should begin with defining the scope and not choosing a game format. And that's why I get very angry with our clients and partners when they call us and they say, we want to make a video game about this castle here in this location. And you're like, are you really sure that the video game is the best way to enhance your heritage? Maybe we need to discuss first what is the best way to do so. So when you have a specific scope, and for specific scope, I mean different types of things, like from tourism. Sorry, I cannot read because of my glasses. I'm really sorry. Tourism development, emotional impact, social inclusions are just some of the scope you should start with when you make a game. Once you have the specific scope for the heritage, you think about your intended audience. And again, when there is a client, or when the majority of studios that approach to applied games, they think that, oh, let's make a cool game about this. They think that the intended audience are gamers. And sorry, this is not the right. I feel a little bit disorientated because this is not my last keynote. But anyway, they think that the target audience is just like the gamer. They don't think about people like cultural enthusiasts or people that students that want to focus on one specific area, like historians or librarians. So the intended audience is another specific key aspect to understand what is the game format you should work with to enhance a cultural heritage. I'm not here to tell you what a game format is. It's a very long list of things. But I'm here to tell you what are the 4 game formats that we use at We Are Muesli. We make video games, we make escape rooms, and pervasive games, and analog games. But instead of moving towards what is analog and what is digital, when we get a brief, when we get someone to work with to valorize, to give value to a heritage, we create a brief according to 2 different axes. What is site specific and what is pocket size? For site specific, we think about a game experience where the audience goes towards the actual heritage to the site. For pocket size, the other way around. The actual the heritage goes to the audience. This is very important. It's a very important approach to start with, because otherwise you're just like you are designing in a nutshell. You're not taking into consideration how you could throw your cards to design in a better, more specific way. Within the spectrum, you have a variety of experiences. You could have a card deck that is based on an iPad. You could have an escape room that is digital, and you could have literally so many different kind of outcome. So once the scope is clearly defined, the game format can be tailored to be digital, analog, or a combination of the two. I'm just digging through some case studies of video games and analog games that we made through the years. Cave Cave Deus Videt was our first video game. It's an R5 visual novel based on the work of Geronimus Bosch. And the brief was pretty simple. It was a brief to promote the works of Dutch painter. It was in anticipation of a big retrospective organized by his foundation in his hometown. So what was the scope? Was an audience development scope, tourism development scope, and educational impact purpose. According to this, we decided that a video game was the right choice, and we made a visual novel to accompany all the initiatives in the hometown of Geronimus Bosch. We picked a specific painting. We studied it very deeply. And then we decided to go with an art style that is not conflicting with the work of the painter, but it's intriguing, still like something different from what the painter did. Also because competing with Bosch, it's absolutely pointless. The result was a very engaging video game. Sorry, there was a slide here recapping what was the result. And the result was that the game was literally performed in many different places and engaging. It had so much reach back then, and it was just a very simple visual novel. Another example of a video game is 20 mesi, 20 months. This is a completely different topic, but still has a social impact value. A collection of playable stories about Italian Renaissance. I'm pretty scared with the new Italian government. Maybe they're going to take this down, but I'm not sure. 20 months was a brief, a game, a piece of experience that was born to celebrate the 17th anniversary of Italian Renaissance after the liberation from Nazi fascism. Oh, sorry, resistance. My eyes, sorry about this. I said resistance instead of, well, anyway. What was the actual purpose? Was, of course, an intergenerational connection between the new history and the old history. A memory revitalization, and also provide to a younger audience emotional impact. We made this visual novel, which is narrative-based, thinking about, it's called 20 months because the resistance in Italy lasts 20 months. And already immediately with the title, you can have a bit of information. But what we decided to do, it was like a research within those people, those elderly people that still survived. We had a lot of conversation. Every story, all the 20 stories come from real stories of people that told us things about the resistance. But another thing that we did with our direction, the creative direction, was making a game that was in full color, because in the mind of the people, Second World War is in grayscale. This is because we have a lot of footage. And when we see games about war, about Second World War, they are kind of vintage style, and we wanted to give a very sharp, modern like Enrico Bai look, because we wanted people to have this brightness of the content. A totally different approach is CIVIS. It's a local co-op video game, a game experience designed to highlight the social significance of Chinese CIVIS, which are those, yes, these ones, which are those houses, traditional Chinese houses, with where in process of being gentrified. Is that, do you all understand? Gentrified in Beijing. What we were asked to provide cultural awareness, cultural preservation, and social inclusion. And of course, we are not Chinese, and we couldn't do that without putting ourselves, without putting our history in it. We tried our best. But what we did, we actually went to Beijing and stayed there for a little while and saw those places and started to make a game that was non-verbal, so that everybody could play around the table, and that was helping people to get the social value of those houses by collaborating around this kind of grid that you see on the screen. The experience went really well, and then I'll show you what was the secondary scope. I give you another example, which is Ghost and Found, and again, another totally different experience, designed to uncover the hidden history of a little village, above all, the abbey of this village, that is still having problems and issues about isolation, depopulation. This is the abbey, and it's an incredible abbey in Italy. It's like the Da Vinci Code kind of abbey that you enter and you see all the most strange things. So we went there, and we understood that the only way to help people to understand the value of this abbey was to make a simple, very simple game based on QR codes, based on the ghost of this place, because there is a lot of legendaries and legends about this place. But that was having, the objective was that whilst you were getting there after a long route, because it's not easy to get there, at least you could scout around, wander around, and meet all those QR codes that were revealing the history through this web app. And sorry, let's go back. And the majority of the puzzles were location-based, so you had to look at the place, and you had puzzles on your web app, and being able to connect the place with the story and the history of the place. The big aim that we learned from all our cases is related to scalability. Scaling your game, it's important, which means if something is born towards one axis, trying to get it to the other axis. That's why game format flexibility is something we care about, and it allows different engagement methods and different objectives, educational objective, cultural objectives, and it helps different fruitions, which also means different type of audience. Cave Cave Deus Videt, the Bosch game, was a video game, but it was exhibited in many, like I cannot even count, many museums across the world. 20 months, 20 mesi, turned into an interactive theatrical piece, so that people could interact directly with a moderator that was an actor. CA1 turned into a tabletop. Now it's on Steam, and it will be released on Switch next year. Our biggest case, and this is the final one, is Wer ist wer? Sorry, my German. Wer ist wer? Okay, better? Who is who? A game experience is exploring themes of walls, both physical and ideological, as well as conformity, non-conformity, and paranoia, inspired by the 13th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. What we were asked, the aim was that we wanted to, of course, revitalize the memory, but we wanted to give an experiential learning. And also there was a lot of community engagement, which means also working with the community to make the game and cultural awareness. We had a location, which is Polo del Novecento in Turin. They gave us a room, and we turned the room into an escape room. This escape room had a video game inside, so that you could interact between what was going on in the video game and those big archives that you had to open. We use actors. I'm not sure if in this slide, no, you don't have the actors. We use actors, like the video game was actor-based, so there were like the position, so it was a very big production. So after that, we made the video, the escape room, we pushed it towards another game solution. During the pandemic, Triennale Milano, which is kind of our MoMA, asked us to move the experience into their theater. And so it became a theater performance that could be experienced via Zoom. So you were, there was an actress inside the real escape room. So we built the escape room inside the theater. And this actress was literally your hands on this. You were telling her, go here, go there, and she was interacting with you. Oh my gosh, let's do this. Oh, I don't know, all those kind of performing things. And then, as a final push, we turned the escape room into an interactive book, and which now is only in Italian. It's an interactive book that can be played at home. So also the inclusiveness of all those people that cannot physically go towards cultural heritage thing. So to wrap up, cultural heritage games needs unique approach focused on social impact with a clear purpose defined from its start. Each heritage should benefit from a tailored game format to enhance engagement. Fitting solution, I did this. Yeah, scalability. A flexible format helps meet culture and educational goals effectively across different media. And that's it. Sorry. This was the most awkward.
No, it was perfect.
20 minutes?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I have a question for you. You don't mention that, but I know your opinion about that, so I want to hear from you. I want them to hear from you. A lot of people talk about gamification.
Yes.
And it's a common term, but it's often used not in a proper way, I think, and I know if you agree.
At least in Italy. I don't know in other countries.
What do you think about?
Okay.
About gamification?
Well, first of all, gamification is not a video game. So whatever is, when we think about gamification, we don't actually. It's a game mechanics applied to something that is not a video game. So Duolingo, it's a perfect example of gamification. I was talking to you yesterday that for me, the perfect game with the most amazing mechanics that can be perceived as a gamified, I don't know if it's English experience, it's Zombie Run. I don't know if you know it. It's an amazing running game. It's audio, you run, and then you have the zombies chasing you. So it's fun. I think that there is a lot, in general, even though there are conferences in Europe, there are academics, there is a lot of studies. There is not the final conference that provides the terminology about gamification, if gamification is good or bad, if it's a video game or not a video game. I think it's bad for culture. Maybe I'm strong about this. I don't think that anything that has a cultural purpose should be enhanced through a gamificated approach, because you're not actually making your audience ambassador of a content, but you are kind of feeding them, like, you know, the Pavlov approach of the dog, like you say sit, you give a biscuit, and this is more or less how the approach with gamification is. But for those who think that gamification is a video game, then I guess it's a good approach. But in general, I don't think gamifications as a way of approaching to culture, it's a good approach. You still love me? Because, yeah,
Is there?
I'm very
There's a heart for you from the public, so yes.
It's like, I don't know if in Spain you have those, we called in Italian televendite. Do you know what they are? Like you have X Factor, and then at some point there is a person that it's promoting, I don't know, a dishwasher powder, and that it's happened to be there. And they do it with a technique that reminds movies. So we don't say the movies are filmificated. So there is not a filmification, but we use gamification, which is also very horrible. It's a very horrible word. Like the word itself, like it sounds like a disease. I have gamification.
Thank you very much. So is there any, yes?
First of all, thank you for your presentation. I loved it. So I was wondering about budget, the way that factor plays in the type of game, because I'm imagining, so depending on the game, the budget is different, right? A video game probably is way more expensive than an analog game, for example. So I wonder, so if a client tells you, I want to do an analog game or an escape room, and you say, you need a video game, by the way, it's like 10 times more expensive. So I just, or the other way around, sometimes they want to pay you more money, and it's like, no, wait, but you need...
Nobody wants to pay me more money. Most of the time is the other way around.
But, okay, but if they tell you, we want you to create a video game, and you
well, sometimes in the at least in Italy, but in the cultural institutions, say world, they are very confused. There is a lot of confusion. There is these things like, we need to make a video game, just like the ultimate solution to problems, like let's make a game. So now our museum that has every year 300 visitors is going to turn from 300 to 300 billions. And you're like, no, it doesn't work like this. First of all, if you want to make that kind of video game, you need a budget that starts from 150K more. And so we try to also be kind of psychologists of our clients and trying to understand that they should reduce their scope and make it very little. That's why we work a lot with scopes, and most of them are locals. I didn't mention, there was a slide about a game that it's called The Great Palermo, and this, which means Palermo, it's a city in Sicily, and it's filled with magic. And for this game, we moved there, and we try to work with the local community. So there is also a way of cutting down cost when you move, and you move as a director. You find um, expertise that are location-based. So you find musicians that are born in that place. You find localizers that have, voice actors that have that particular accent. So you work with the people, which means that you are creating something like a 0-kilometer kind of approach to the game. But our budgets and our games are not like the AAA, not even the AA kind of budgets. They are small, very small budgets that are more related to a small exhibition or something like this. That's why our games are little. They are little experience that are meaningful for that particular scope. I hope I answered.
Yep, thank you.
Yes, thank you for your talk. It was a little bit of the same question, but not exactly. Same, but different. Sometimes when I work with clients, they come with a problem. So there are two possibilities. Either they absolutely don't know anything about any value, any scope, any rien du tout. Or they sometimes do have a very, very precise idea of what they want. And very often it's not the idea I would have gone with, which doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, but sometimes it's very bad. So my question is, how do you, work with them on how they project on your idea? And the second question is, why games? What is the appeal? What allows? What do games allow you to accomplish that you wouldn't be able to with other forms?
Well, for the first question, I would say that if a client that is ignorant, let me use this term, about what games are, I try to make metaphors that explains that you cannot go to a doctor and be the doctor. Because you're coming to me to solve a problem. If you come with the solution, then do the solution with some other partners. I need to be involved in the solution. You cannot just say, I thought about this, and can you do it for me? We do not work like this. And this arrives also with saying a lot of no's. We built in times a very strong identity, which is pretty different from conventional games. And this allowed us, it was hard, but this allowed us to say, if you're coming to us, it's because you want to trust us. You want us to follow you. It doesn't mean that we do not take the brief or we do not understand the meanings. There is a lot of conversations. But I come from traditional design, and one of the weirdest things that I don't promote is the common knowledge that everybody could be a designer. We could be designers. Of course, everybody could be a designer. But it's like saying everybody could be a politician, everybody could be a doctor. Everybody has his own jobs. And it's important that there is a trust, and that if you have ideas, it's nice to discuss them, but if this idea is just like nonsense and it will be pricey. And I had a client a few years ago who wanted to make an art game for he's a company that makes crayons. And they wanted to make games that could, by the drawing of the kids, could tell, like by framing the painting, could tell how the child improved in drawing. And I was like, AI was not there yet, and it's like, how can you tell in artistic terms that someone has improved? So if I frame Picasso, can I say that this is a good drawing? Like, that's very hard. So we had to move ideas around. I don't know if I answered.
Another question.
I am huge fan. Thank you so much. Really, really huge fan of your works and great talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So my question is, do you have a methodology to grab to catch the effectiveness of the design, not just for the clients, but also to iterate the design in later works? I mean, how do you work this? How do you know how it works if your design works really? Do you have a way to?
Okay. Everything that we do is tailored. It's tailor-made to the specific heritage. Some people asked us for a kind of, can we make a white box video game that can be, by changing the characters and the narrative, it could work for every kind of heritage that we're in? And the answer is, of course, no. It's like making the perfect movies where actors moves and they just pretend to talk and you put whatever you want them to say. This is not the right approach. But for every game that we make a social impact report that, of course, we are little, is not one of those major reports, but we try to have indicators to understand what kind of social impact the game had. Like, we made an escape room for an Italian writer called Gianni Rodari, and this game was for a library. This escape room was for a big, important library in Italy, next to the hometown of this writer. And how we tried to understand what kind of social impact the game had, first thing we monitored was the amount of books that have been lended from the library about that writer. Because if you do the experience, then you might want to know more. And we monitored how many books were lended whilst the escape room was there. And that meant that every book that were rented by the library was a person should have bought in a bookstore. So we calculated how much amount of money people saved by going to the experience. And this is the kind of things that we do to understand the local impact, the social impact, and things like this. Like for Ghost and Found, we calculate, there is nothing around that abbey. It's a beautiful abbey, but there's nothing. Like you cycle for centuries, and you arrive there, and sometimes there is a coffee shop that it's open, but you never know. It's by luck. So we try to calculate by the amount of people that get connected to the Wi-Fi of the abbey, because now there is a Wi-Fi. How many people were there? How long they lasted in the place? And if they lasted more than a certain hour, then it meant that they also went eating around a restaurant around there. So we tried to understand what the economical impact that this type of games have on the territory. I don't know if I answered, but
Yes,
indicators
definitely.
are very creative as well.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. And the third lecturer of the day before the break. I think that in Spanish, descanso means break. Okay, so you are the third lecturer before the break. So Cleo Montrey from Microboard Games. And I'm going to introduce you while they prepare your slides. And you are going to speak about Dungeons of Interberg, and it's nice to meet you in person, because 1 month ago we met during an online lecture, and you are here in person today. Dungeons of Interberg, a magic lens for practical issues. This talk explored how Dungeons of Interberg, a game by Microbird Games 2024, addresses socially relevant issues such as personal growth, community, over-tourism, the environment, and mythology in folklore. And your Cleo Monterey is producer at Microbird Games and an independent musician. She shipped her first game title, Dungeons of Interberg, in July 2024. In her musical life, she's an alumna of McGill, MUC, or MUC?
MOOC, Musik- und Kunstuniversität.
Okay, MUC.
Yeah,
And NDW, and has won several distinctions and awards. Cleo can be heard on the choice of several soundtracks, among others The Rings of Power, Avatar, The Last Airbender, and World of Warcraft Dragonflight. So, thank you.
Indeed. Thanks for the lovely introduction. Just a question. I would like the trailer of our game played before my presentation, if that's possible, please. Which I informed them of very late, so just don't count this against them. That was 100% on me. Hi everyone, voy a hablar en inglés, pero si tienen preguntas en español, si los preguntan lentamente, yo puedo comprender. Si no comprendo, voy a contrapreguntar. Estoy muy agradecida de estar aquí hoy, pero va a estar un poquito más simple hacerlo en inglés. Si no comprenden algo, por favor, simplemente pueden interrumpirme, no me da mucha vergüenza, y simplemente vamos a ver cómo funciona. Okidoki. So back to English. A trailer should appear shortly. Thank you.
The CIA has particular skills in developing relationships. Life is all about relationships.
Yeah, so I don't know what the CIA is doing spying on my presentation. I'm not that interesting. But yeah, this is indeed, as Andreas said, and I'm very grateful for his invitation here today, as well as the CIVIS conference. This is my very first game title. Before that, I was full-time in music. And I had approached games before from a musical world-building perspective, but yeah, this is my first professional title. So let's have a look at Dungeons of Hinterberg. I'm going to follow along on my phone a little bit so that I can see what I'm saying, because I don't have this memorized. This is a magical lens for down-to-earth themes. What does that mean? Who controls the slides? Is that me or is that someone else? Ah, awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'm doing great already, aren't I? Okay, oh yay, okay, so about me. You heard all about me already, but I'm gonna tell you a little bit more from the personal angles, I guess. So yeah, I'm mostly with a background in opera composition, audio production, streaming management, research. I was actually on a research project for, it was called Transcoding What If, out of Kunstuniversität Graz, that dealt with participatory art and artistic research. So I had a bit of a background already in related themes. I am also part of an association in Austria called the Pioneers of Game Dev Austria. What we do is we do outreach and representation of interests for Austrian game developers and especially important for indies. So last year I founded a mentorship program there. It's called the Digital Mentorship, which I didn't have time for anymore after the game launch. Things became really, really busy. So some wonderful colleagues took that over. I had a sort of co-captain, Raphael Moser, and he and his team are working on that right now. But I'm still an ambassador for the association, so if you have any interest in the Austrian game dev scene, come talk to me. All right, more about me. Languages, I'm a huge language nerd. Coffee, huge coffee nerd, mostly drinking it. And I have a bunch of other interests which we don't have to get into right now. Let's keep going. All right, I'm gonna give you a quick abstract because we probably already forgot it. So basically, a really quick summary. The contemporary world collides with magic in Dungeons of Hinterberg, Microbird Games 2024. Playing as Luisa, you visit Hinterberg in the Austrian Alps and explore 25 magical dungeons full of mythical monsters. This talk explores how Dungeons of Hinterberg approaches socially relevant topics such as personal growth, community, over-tourism, the environment, and mythology and folklore, and how these topics can be effectively explored in contemporary media such as games. All right, my first slide, a magical lens for reality. It might help if I can see it from here. Yeah, this is great. This is actually much better. So basically, as some of the other presenters have already said, the medium of the video game is a really great vehicle for cultural knowledge, and it can illustrate serious concepts as well as stuff that's a little more fun. And combining those into one package where people find this subject matter accessible is a really cool thing that we now have the means to do technologically. So in our games, there's various ways that this is accomplished, but today I'm going to focus on social relationships. So you'd think a game that's a single-player RPG action-adventure isn't very social, but ours is social insofar as the various NPCs and your introspective monologues tackle these various subjects. Yeah, talking about what matters. So what matters to these characters is maybe what matters to people in the wider society. We do have deeper subjects, storyline with more serious implications, social dynamics as well, introversion, extroversion. Our main character is quite introverted when she begins, at least. And NPCs are used as a sort of vehicle for transmitting different types of I guess, themes that they find important to them, and maybe you will find important to yourself as well. Some of these may be larger, some of these may be considered smaller or more selfish, but I think they're all equally valid. So let's begin with inner life. So some characters' stories are just all about them, and what is more important for them is maybe they're talking about their inner growth, right? So it's more intra than interpersonal. And let's get personal. So Luisa is someone that we are meant to relate to. This is our playable character. And she's opening up to strangers, making new friends, and really rediscovering herself in Hinterberg. But what's interesting here is that we use a lot of devices borrowed from literature because she's kind of a lens for the other characters. She's kind of a tabula rasa, if you will, for what you will be conveying as you yourself, the player. So the player might be interested in exploring different things. So you have different NPCs to talk to, different adventures, different play styles. You can either be very adventurous and do a dungeon every day, or you can sit by the lake, or you can just talk to someone all the time. It's really your choice. But Luisa's inner life is rich. She talks to herself a lot, which is great for the player, I hope. All right, so we're gonna meet a few of the residents of Hinterberg. And the first one is Marina, and she's my personal favorite because she has a really sunny outlook, and she's from España, yay. She's an exchange student, always with a smile, and she deals with difficult situations with aplomb and a lot of tact, sometimes not really leaving room for herself. Jay is an interesting character because she has burnout, and this is a topic that I find is not something that is commonly tackled in the AAA titles, but is tackled a lot in indie games, that we're talking more about mental health and what that means for us, and why is it important to talk about mental health? Now you could say, okay, this isn't a huge theme about social impact, but what is really social impact? It's about people, right? So Jay is just talking about her feeling overwhelmed. She's a famous star, she's also a musician, and she can't do it all anymore. So you as Luisa As you play, you maybe tell her to calm down a bit, find room for herself. And maybe along the process, if you're the player, this might cause some reflections for you. All right, so we have more selfish characters too. I love Travis. He's French, and he is incredibly selfish. Not to create any stereotypes, this is just hilarious, because he's one of my favorites because he has a huge growth arc. So Travis, this quote I included on purpose. So he says, "Just so we're clear, if this backwater hole had options, I wouldn't be caught dead in here." So he's in the local bar, dissing it, right? So Travis is afraid to go into any dungeon, but we soon find out that's trauma-based. He's had a difficult time. He's always had to fend for himself. And he's writing for this sort of in-game version of Vice magazine. He's really, really trendy, but he's too cool for it. And as Luisa gets to know him, she realizes that he's using trauma as a defense mechanism. So we have discussions or maybe difficult personal subjects here. And authenticity is important here because he really finds his authentic self. All right, so this microphone's too close to my face. Alex is the inquisitive mentor character, and this is an interesting character because what she does is she shows up in Hinterberg. She's a real estate agent, and she's the first person Luisa kind of runs into after the hotel hostess and the trainer, so maybe third, fourth person she runs into in Hinterberg. And so Alex is very self-assured. Alex seems to have it all figured out. And Alex also points Luisa in the right directions in the game. She says, "Hey, Luisa, have you noticed that this thing is weird, that thing is weird? Maybe not all is as it seems." But then, when it comes time, there's a little bit of an interplay where maybe Luisa has to motivate Alex a little bit, and you see where people can sort of help each other out. I find this a very, very interesting character because it's a friendship that you're forced to take through the game. So we have some optional relationships and some relationships you have to play through. And this is one of those that you have to play through. And so Alex really provokes those difficult questions. What did you hope to find here, Luisa? Did you hope to find yourself? Are you just here to exploit this tourist trap? And that's leading us to community life. Community life is not important to all the NPCs, but it's very important to some of them. And they're concerned more about their surroundings than about themselves or others or interpersonal relationships. They focus on larger groups, larger systems. And these conversations bring to mind the topics you'd traditionally associate with social impact. Maybe community building over tourism, environmentalism. But in my opinion, all of those other things that came before are no less valid because all of those aspects are elements of what you then build on to create social impact. So we have Klaus the alpinist, and yes, that is a real word, mountaineer, dedicated to the Alps. So this is a very interesting character. This is the first character you really interact with in the game, and he shows you around the dungeons. He's kind of like a David Attenborough type, and he's deeply dedicated to the mountains, to nature, preservation, hates litter, has a little station where you can clean things up, bring him the litter, recycle, all of that. He has vegan schnitzel. He's got it all sort of categorized in his mind that he wants to present this face of Hinterberg. Okay, I want this village to be improving. I'm a little worried about the over-tourism here, but I'm making the best of it. I'm the trainer. I'm keeping these tourists safe. So he's kind of an honorable village figure. And he's unapologetically himself, which is pretty cool for an NPC. All right, so we come to one of my favorite characters here, Thea, the rebel with a cause. Thea is a teenager, and she is incredibly upset about Hinterberg. Hinterberg is full of tourist slayers. They're here, they're having a blast, they're polluting, they're throwing garbage all over the beautiful mountain. You're one of these tourists. So Thea, when she meets you, is a little bit confrontational. She's like, "Hey, Luisa, what are you doing here? Do you think it's so cool staring at the locals?" So all of this kind of storytelling is not only, "Oh, yay, you're our friend, I'm your friend, I'm the NPC," and all of a sudden you show up and we're gonna help you. You have to earn some trust, and that is really the case with Thea because she is uncovering a plot in the village that is threatening it, And she has a lot of scorn for politicians, for what's going on in the village, and scorn for tourists, including at the beginning yourself. Another character that's really caring about these group dynamics here is Danny the environmentalist, who wants to use their fame and platform to talk about the environmental impact. But they fear their own hypocrisy, because Danny is a prodigy with a strong conscience. But they're here, they're slaying, they're polluting as much as everyone else. And so that's something that I think our game approaches in a unique way, talking about the hypocrisy of social change. And we have these two lovely ladies. They have been here forever, and they have seen the village change, and they don't feel there's room for them anymore. So Teresa runs your local inn. She's on the left. You check in with her, and Gertrude on the right has been coming here every summer for her entire life, and she doesn't like what's happening to the village. Now we come to folklore and setting, not really the focus of this talk, but as you can see, all of these characters are framed in this beautiful mountain environment. As you saw in the trailer, you're fighting these magical monsters, and it's steeped in the alpine myths of the region. So this is where we link sort of tradition and folklore to a character. Albert is a comparative mythologist, so we invented a sort of character for the game that approaches this in some sort of academic way. And he is, however, not very practical. He doesn't like to go into the dungeons. You good? And he hates basically dealing with the practicalities of magic, but he researches it a lot. So he helps Luisa out with all these information things, and you know, he's at the first skill shrine where you learn how to use magic, but he's not actually gonna do it himself. Oh no, he's just researching. He's gonna send a grad student, and over time, if you do choose to hang out with him, he might develop his storyline into something a little more practical. So, the monsters in our game actually just reflect local mythology. Each creature is rooted in a local legend. We researched all of these creatures. And the biome bosses are also magical creatures based on local alpine myths. Oops. Oh, this goes. I can see the difficulty everyone had. Okay, so this is a terrible pun. You can laugh if you want, but you don't have to. The Percht is a local mythological creature. You can see on the upper left, so I called this pertinent information. You don't have to humor me. And so this is just one example of one of our monsters. The other is a Pitzel, who's a sneaky little fiend. And basically, these monsters are all based on real mythological creatures with their own mythologies and stories in local culture. This is also the case for the Tatzelwurm, a sort of cat-headed dragon creature, which is one of our biome bosses. So what we did also is reflected in each biome the different characteristics. We have a forest biome, a mountain biome, a glacier biome, and a swamp biome. And the bosses sort of reflect the mythologies that came from those kind of environments. So basically, here we come to the more sort of social change things that are usually considered stereotypically more important or more significant, especially when it comes to discussions of social change. We're talking about ecology, we're talking about natural beauty, and various NPCs are going to comment as you go along things about these natural wonders. Like you have an NPC on the glacier saying, wow, I've never seen snow before, I've never seen a glacier before, and that's also alluding to the glacier recession. And we have an NPC that's spouting these facts about peat bogs. And peat mining is extremely destructive. We actually have a very large system of wetlands in Austria that are incredibly biodiversity important. And so one of these NPCs tells you about it, but on the side, you know, you're going along, you get into the peat bog, and you ask, what is this? Well, rather, you press A to talk to the NPC, and the NPC tells you a little bit about it. And I really find our game as a beautiful love letter to nature and its preservation, because it's not doing so overtly. It's not telling you environmentalism good. It's just showing you something, and it's saying, you know, this is worth preserving, this is beautiful. How is it worth preserving? Is interaction on a tourist level always the best idea for this? Is what Luisa's doing the best idea for this? Should she be mindful when she's going around? Should the other slayers going through the dungeons be mindful? or not? Or what is the bigger problem here? And I don't want to spoil too much because we do have a deep mystery in the village, but let's say we have a nefarious character as well, and they're incredibly creepy and things are not going to be as they seem, but this nefarious character also brings up a lot of the aspects of commercialization which the characters will engage with. So basically, there's a lot more to our game than simply NPCs, but I tried to use these kind of very day-to-day conversations that Louisa would have as a framework of reference for various topics that our game addresses. I wouldn't call it tangential, but I would say that the nice thing about an action RPG carrying these themes is that you're not being overt. You're being almost covert. You're giving someone a game that they want to play, they go into it, and they're not going to think, oh, I'm going to talk to the environmentalist. I'm going to talk to the alpinist who wants to clean up the dungeons. You're going to get little incentives. You pick up a bunch of glowing loot, and you notice, recyclable trash. Recyclable trash. And then you'll try to find who can give you some money for that recyclable trash. So it's a little bit, you know, I guess I can use the dreaded word, gamified, but I think in our context it works. Actually I agree with Claudia that gamification as of itself is a troubling concept, but we do use mechanics in our game to encourage tackling certain subjects in a way that we find not to be, I guess, too dominant to the gameplay, but still very much present in the setting of the game. These are my social channels. You can follow me. You can talk to me after in person. And if you have any questions about the game, about the studio, please feel free now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a thing that I'm interested about. One of the themes of the game is over-tourism. It's something we are discussing a lot, especially in Italy, for example, when we think of cities like Venice and the problem related to tourists. Have you ever thought that a game like this can create a new itineraries or maybe make some the town where that inspired the game can be I don't know if it's really a very touristic town or not, but do you think that games can contribute to create new tourist itineraries or something like that?
Actually, this is not a real town. There are a few Hinterbergs around, but this is an imaginary every town. But yeah, I do think they can. But I also think the game questions whether that's how the balance of tourism versus local works. Because yes, I do think that a game has the potential to increase tourism to Austria, for example, to the Alps. But our very nature of our game questions the balance between the destructiveness and the benefit of such a thing. More so than that, I think the inner life is very important in our game. So that's why I focused so heavily on the personal growth aspect. I think the game has much more potential to make you reflect, okay, what am I doing with my life? Am I reaching my goals? Am I really moving forward to what's important to me? Each NPC has their own priorities and they're sort of presenting them. And you're reflecting, you're developing, you're kind of trying to align yourself. Do I think like Danny? Do I think, you know, that I'm a hypocrite and I want to be more environmental? Or do I think more like Klaus and I want to save the mountains? Or maybe I want to go with Taya and protest something. So yeah, I do think that completely right. It can increase tourist thought and visiting and thinking about a place and inciting that, absolutely. But it also is a vehicle for critique of those phenomena. Yeah.
Is there any question from the public? No question. Oh, there's a question.
Yay!
Thanks. Yeah, my question was, how did the characters develop over the course of you developing the game? Like, did their arcs change as maybe you iterated on it?
Okay, so I'm the producer, so I'm not actually the one who wrote the game. That was in large part, we have two co-founders, Philip Seifried and Regina Eisinger. Philip was technical direction, Regina was art direction. And so Philip did the majority of the story. It was a lot of writing of very large scale plans, and most of it was pretty fixed, I would say. The only thing that changed during the course of development of the game was more refining subject matter. Some characters shifted their perspectives and became deeper. There was, for example, a storyline for one of the characters that was, just to create conflict in the way that some sort of dramatic arc would be playing out, like writing a script. And then we realized that's just not working for this character. It's too out of nowhere. And so, informed by playtests as well, there were some writing tweaks, like people would become more gentle, more convincing. But it was just trying to make it as natural as possible. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thanks. Who doesn't?
So no more questions. So it's thank you.
Thank you.
And so it's time for a break, and we are going to start again in 15 minutes, so we can have a coffee. So thank you again, Cleo.
Thank you so much.
In 15 minutes.
evento se está emitiendo en streaming, hay mucha gente viendo esto desde casa. Así que esto significa que podemos tener una conversación mucho más fluida porque no hay que atender a una masa de gente. En el siguiente slot de este track vamos a hablar de cómo se puede utilizar el videojuego como herramienta para transmitir las culturas locales, desde el folclore a la mitología, la historia, la tradición cultural, musical y, en fin, todo otro tipo de elementos de las culturas locales, que en una época y en un mundo de globalización en la que la tentación siempre es tender hacia el mínimo común múltiplo, estemos intentando lo contrario, transmitir aquello que nos une de las tradiciones personales de cada uno, en lugar de irnos a lo más o menos universal y blando, sin ningún sabor, siempre es, por un lado, una postura valiente, pero por otro lado, una manera muy inteligente de acceder al público final y de interesarle, de conseguir ese ansiado engagement con algo que se sale un poco de las rutinas habituales. Para hablar de esto, en primer lugar, tenemos a los compañeros de Novalingo, Juan Carlos García y Daniel Cañete. Espero haber acertado con vuestros nombres a la primera y si no, me corregís ahora cuando salgáis. Un fuerte aplauso para ellos, por favor.
Buenas tardes. José Luis, ¿verdad?
Sí, José Luis, es José Luis. ¿Había opciones? Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy José Luis García, él es Daniel Cañete. Y bueno, somos de Novelingo, una empresa que hace, sorpresa, videojuegos. Pero no sé si ponemos el vídeo primero, damos una chapa, ¿qué hacemos?
Venga, vamos a poner el vídeo.
Sí, yo creo que veis el vídeo y ahora entenderéis por qué estamos aquí.
Bueno,
muchas gracias.
Este es nuestro videojuego formativo sobre flamenco, ¿vale? Y que podéis encontrar en las tiendas de iOS y de Android. Está disponible y esta semana además está gratuito, hasta el día 20.
Hasta el día 20, hasta el miércoles.
Por el Día Internacional del Flamenco, ¿verdad?
Sí, que se celebró hace unos días y bueno, de hecho hicimos un taller especial en el Museo Interactivo de la Música aquí en Málaga y todavía está gratuito para su descarga. Y ese es el motivo, ¿no?, por el que estamos principalmente aquí.
Es el motivo, sí.
Bueno, nosotros hemos hecho un juego de flamenco y el flamenco generalmente de forma tradicional se relaciona mucho con Andalucía, eso tiene sentido, porque aunque los flamencos no se ponen de acuerdo sobre el verdadero origen del flamenco, lo cierto es que de una forma u otra, da igual cuándo fuese ni quién lo hiciera, pero el flamenco principalmente es una música del sur de España, de Andalucía principalmente, también de Murcia, que luego, bueno, pues se ha expandido por toda España y hoy día por todo el mundo, ¿no? Nosotros nos acercamos al flamenco porque aunque yo quizá no lo parezca tanto, soy malagueño, Daniel también, y el flamenco, bueno, forma parte un poco de nuestra vida sin realmente formar parte, y esto os lo explico. Nosotros hicimos este juego desde la casi total ignorancia del flamenco, ¿no? Nunca ha sido una música de la que yo haya sido particularmente fan, y eso que soy el guionista del juego, y Daniel, rectifícame, tú tampoco.
No, yo tampoco, la verdad es que no. Esto surgió también por una subvención del Ministerio de Cultura, en el cual pues teníamos una idea de plantear diferentes videojuegos para cada una de las provincias de Andalucía. Por eso empezamos con la idea de Málaga, ¿no? Si veis también el videojuego, la mayor parte de los escenarios que tiene es una novela visual interactiva en la que salen varios personajes. El principal es el Pillayo y hay varios escenarios que son pues de Málaga, ¿no? Lo que pasa es que aparte de querer hacer todo este recorrido por Andalucía, luego vimos que quizás era más interesante hacerlo por toda España, ¿no? Entonces cambiamos un poco y fuimos directamente a incluir a otros escenarios, ¿no?
Pese a ello, y como se puede ver incluso en el vídeo, pero sobre todo si jugáis al juego, las raíces malagueñas están muy presentes. El personaje principal es el Pillayo, que es un flamenco malagueño histórico, ya fallecido, una figura muy importante en Málaga. Nacional también, tuvo una película en los años 50, es un personaje que tiene cierta leyenda popular. Es una especie de prechiquito de la calzada y los escenarios son muy malagueños. Arrancamos en el pasaje de Chinitas, que es un lugar muy flamenco de aquí de Málaga, continúa por Ronda y luego en realidad no hay mucho de Málaga más propiamente, pero en realidad si rascas te das cuenta que casi todo tiene su origen en Málaga. Pero os contaba lo de que no éramos apasionados del flamenco, porque creo que también es importante respecto al motivo de la mesa en la que estamos, cómo transmitir las culturas locales. Nosotros no lo hicimos por una pasión personal, lo hicimos como un proyecto profesional puramente impuesto por nosotros mismos. Es verdad que gracias a ello tuvimos una ayuda, pero nuestro interés era precisamente porque creíamos que con los videojuegos se puede transmitir exactamente, por ejemplo, una cultura local. Y insisto, no porque fuese nuestra gran pasión, sino porque creemos que los videojuegos bien tratados, los Serious Games en particular, y las novelas visuales, que son nuestro campo aún más particularmente, son magníficas herramientas de transmisión de conocimiento. Y además son magníficas herramientas de transmisión de espíritus, de lugares, de cultura, ¿no? Yo, por ejemplo, hace unos días estuve aquí en Málaga, vino Art Explora, que es un proyecto francés de una fundación que lleva proyectos artísticos por todo el Mediterráneo. Recaló en Málaga hace una semana, he estado 10 días por aquí haciendo presentaciones, conciertos, intervenciones artísticas. Ellos lo hacen, van por todo el Mediterráneo en un catamarán. Esta historia tiene que ver con videojuegos, de verdad, creedme, no me alargo mucho. Y una de las cosas que hacen es que en el interior del catamarán tienen una experiencia virtual, con gafas 360, las MetaQuest 3 en concreto, y te ofrecen 3 viajes por el Mediterráneo. Uno a Venecia, a la Venecia del siglo XV, otro a la Atenas helénica y un tercero a Egipto, al Egipto más trillado de las pirámides y del Nilo. Y lo hacen con videojuegos en realidad, porque la experiencia se la ha desarrollado Ubisoft. Os sonará todo a escenarios de Assassin's Creed, porque es lo que han hecho. Se lo han hecho a ellos. Y igualmente, hablando con la organización de Art Explora, hablando por lo menos con la responsable de prensa, me decía que sí, que ellos utilizaban mucho el videojuego, que era un interés personal del fundador de Art Explora, que creía también en que los videojuegos eran un instrumento de transmisión, y en este caso igualmente de una cultura local más amplia, que es la del Mediterráneo, ¿no? Y no sé si esto sirve ya suficiente como para... Porque no sé si realmente luego, cuando vengan nuestros compañeros de Maldita Castilla, yo creo que más que hablar de cómo hemos hecho flamenco, aquí por ejemplo, podría hablar más de la música nuestro compañero Felipe Milano, que es el autor de la música, no el que toca la guitarra, ese es Pepín Naranjo, pero es el responsable musical del juego, que es una labor muy importante la suya en este juego, sin duda, lo es siempre. Pero quizá más que entrar en detalles de cómo lo hemos hecho, aunque bueno, solo 2 apuntes. Realmente este juego, cuando digo que si rascas tiene mucho de Málaga, no es solo, digamos, en lo programático, o digamos en lo evidente, en lo pedagógico. Tú ves los lugares y dices, esto es Ronda, esto es Málaga, el pasaje Chinitas, centro de Málaga, el personaje Pillayo es de Málaga. Pero incluso en lo que no percibes, en lo que no te ponemos en la cara el nombre de Málaga, ni la cultura en concreto de este territorio tan cercano como es el nuestro, de la ciudad y la provincia, hay mucho, porque los sonidos que están grabados realmente en lugares, hay una peña flamenca y hay un taller de guitarras en el juego, son una peña flamenca real de Málaga y un taller de guitarras de aquí de la ciudad. Las anécdotas las hemos ido trufando un poco alrededor del juego con elementos también locales, porque inevitablemente en este juego, y no solo porque en un principio fuese la idea, pero yo creo que cuando hablas de algo que te es cercano, aunque, insisto, de verdad, no somos apasionados ni escuchamos flamenco habitualmente, ni antes, ni ahora, ni después, ¿no? Pero no deja de ser algo cercano. Y supongo que cuando nosotros nos reunimos en su momento buscando una idea de un nuevo proyecto, hace ya casi 2 años, salió el flamenco de una forma evidente, y eso no tengo ninguna duda, porque no deja de ser algo cercano, aunque no sea nuestro exactamente del día a día, ¿no?
Nosotros venimos del e-learning, por ejemplo, y no sé si sabéis lo que son los cursos online de esto de formación, y ahí te dan cualquier material que tú tienes que convertir en una especie de algo entretenido o interactivo que puedan hacer los alumnos, o incluso en nuestro caso pues también hemos tenido que convertir eso en videojuegos, ¿no? Y la verdad es que el hacerlo con el flamenco y con Andalucía o con Málaga y demás es mucho más gratificante que muchos de los cursos que hemos tenido que ir realizando, ¿no?
Bueno, y casi por terminar, porque no llevamos el control de tiempo, pero bueno, supongo que merece la pena que luego tengamos más debate, ¿no? No simplemente cada uno contar su historia. Nosotros, inevitablemente, que somos una empresa de Málaga, un videojuego que no es el que traemos aquí, que no tiene nada que ver en principio, que es un juego totalmente deslocalizado, que es un juego sobre ciberseguridad, no necesariamente tiene que estar situado en ningún sitio, y de hecho nuestro juego no dice estar exactamente en ningún lugar, inevitablemente, porque es algo que ocurre cuando estás creando al fin y al cabo algo, lo cercano se te pega mucho y al final como la transmisión, como una enfermedad, ya lo digo, como una enfermedad de transmisión sexual, tú la pasas al siguiente, ¿no? Innecesariamente por completo, pero utilizamos escenarios de Málaga para ese videojuego. No había necesidad, no era algo, pero inevitablemente quisimos de alguna forma darle como una imprimación local también de donde somos, ¿no? Y no es un juego que en ningún momento se diga que se desarrolla en Málaga, no, pero los escenarios, sobre todo uno muy particular, es Málaga, ¿no? Es algo que yo creo que cualquier creador, que es mucho decir nosotros creadores, pero bueno, cualquier creador de alguna forma al final lo cercano lo acaba transmitiendo incluso en algo que aparentemente es muy universal, ¿no? Como en este caso un juego totalmente deslocalizado, como os digo, sobre ciberseguridad, ¿no? Y yo creo que ya, y yo creo que ya lo interesante es conocer Maldita Castilla, que es un juegazo, como todos sabéis.
Muchísimas gracias, José Luis García, Daniel Cañete, de Novelingo. Y como muy bien nos ha dicho José Luis, nuestros próximos invitados son las mentes pensantes y manos trabajantes detrás de varios de los videojuegos más destacados de la escena indie española de la última década, con el girito peculiar de que cuando a veces hablamos del juego indie más destacado se habla casi por tamaño, por peso, ¿no? Trabaja tanta gente y ha vendido tanto y ha hecho tanto. Y la filosofía de Loco Malito en ese sentido es muy distinta. Corrígeme después si me estoy equivocando, pero trabaja mucho en tus ratos libres, básicamente, con una filosofía de diseño muy concentrada en si juegas 10 minutos, tienen que ser 10 minutos perfectos. Todo tiene que estar medido hasta el último detalle. Esto, sumado a llegar a lo universal, a llegar a tocar e interesar a cualquier jugador desde su experiencia local, creo que son dos elementos fundamentales de toda su obra. Pero mejor que salga él a contarlo. Así que un fuerte aplauso para Loco Malito y para Grizor.
Bueno, ¿qué tal? Pues un poco lo que comentaba. Nosotros somos Grisol87 y yo soy Loco Malito. Él es profesor de matemáticas, yo soy diseñador gráfico. Lo que pasa es que por las noches pues dedicamos nuestro tiempo a hacer videojuegos. Entonces somos desarrolladores aficionados. Desde... A ver, si no...
Para arriba o...
Uy.
Vamos a ver si va el cambio de diapositiva.
Va, no va. Ahí va. Pues bueno, desde 2008 hasta esta parte, estos son los juegos que hemos hecho. La mayoría son gratuitos, algunos se hicieron comerciales porque tuvieron bastante éxito y acabaron pues, por casi presión de los fans llegando a circuitos más comerciales. Pero hoy lo que vamos a hablar son de estos tres, que son los que están conectados con todo esto que estamos hablando. El primero de ellos es este, que me costaría pronunciar su nombre porque no hablo francés, y fue un caso muy curioso porque ya habíamos hecho un par de juegos más grandes, estábamos cansados, llevábamos años haciendo juegos grandes y queríamos hacer un juego muy pequeño, diminuto, y que estaría basado en ordenadores antiguos de Spectrum y demás, y coincidió que durante un viaje al sur de Francia conocimos esta historia, la historia de la cruzada de los cátaros, que no sé si alguien por aquí la conoce, pero el caso es que para nosotros era algo súper nuevo y nos quedamos un poco prendados de esta historia y la conectamos con el juego que queríamos hacer. Y así fue como nació este juego, que era un juego pues, hecho literalmente en una semana.
Improvisación.
De improvisación total, no había nada planificado y era pues imitando un ordenador antiguo y algo en principio que se iba a subir a una web de forma gratuita y que no tenían más recorrido que ese. Pero resulta que pasó algo muy curioso, que cuando publiqué el juego pues empezaron a haber muchos artículos hablando del juego. Y una cosa curiosa es que, claro, todos los artículos decían algo parecido a esto, ¿no? Decían, en un mundo paralelo estaría harto de hablar de juegos de cátaros, pero resulta que solo existe uno, ¿no? Y entonces pasó una cosa curiosa. Este juego, hubo un momento en el que unos chicos se interesaron en hacer un port para el ordenador que estábamos imitando, para hacerlo real para ese ordenador, y en el proceso pues acabaron liberando el código dio paso a un montón de versiones para un montón de sistemas diferentes hechos por distintos equipos, algunos sistemas incluso que ni nosotros mismos conocíamos. Y lo que pasó muy curioso es que en todos estos sistemas, que cada uno tiene su escena con sus jugadores y sus reuniones y demás, cada vez que salía el juego en un sistema, tenían, para que explicar el juego, que hablar de los cátaros. Entonces tenía una escena o un blog sobre Commodore 64 hablando de los cátaros, un blog sobre Nintendo de 8 bits hablando de los cátaros, y de repente había mucha gente que no tenía nada que ver con todo esto que estaba hablando de los cátaros, ¿no?
Con este juego se le dio como difusión a la historia de los cátaros, pero nosotros no buscamos eso en ningún momento, pero fue un efecto que tuvo.
Fue una cosa como un poco casual, pero nos sorprendió y nos quedamos un poco con eso en mente. Luego seguimos haciendo algunos juegos y llegó un momento en el que hicimos otro viaje, que parece que es que esto nos da en los viajes. Esta vez fue un fin de semana en Segovia. En este fin de semana estábamos en un hotelito súper chulo, teníamos más o menos estas vistas, pero por la noche estaba allí con la luna llena encima y estábamos diciendo, wow, esto parece la intro de cualquiera de estos clásicos arcades que tanto nos gustan, ¿no? Y hablando de eso, pues surgió esta conversación en la que decíamos, es curioso que la mayoría de los juegos que nos gustan, arcades clásicos, juegos de acción, son juegos japoneses hablando de mitos centroeuropeos y pasan un montón de cosas que si lo piensas son muy raras, ¿no?
Sí, cometen muchísimas inconsistencias, tienen elementos, mezclan culturas, mezclan elementos que no tienen que ver, fuera de contexto, eso es bastante recurrente en lo que son los videojuegos japoneses.
Entonces, claro, pues bueno, esos juegos no estaban, igual que los nuestros también, pues no estaban centrados en la parte cultural, ¿no? Simplemente eran juegos que tú ibas con una espada pues luchando contra demonios y ya está. Pero no,
entretenimiento simplemente, pero tampoco sin entrar en el detalle, claro.
Claro, nosotros decimos, nuestros juegos son juguetes, los nuestros no son arte ni son cultura, son juguetes, pero se le puede dar un poquito más de consistencia. Entonces nos preguntamos, ¿qué pasaría si hacemos un juego de este tipo que tanto nos gustan, pero nos curramos un poco la consistencia y nos inventamos un pueblo imaginario, pero que cuele, que tenga un nombre que parezca real, que tenga una arquitectura que parezca real, que tenga elementos pues, que podemos ver en un viaje alrededor de España y que todo vaya conectado de una manera lógica. Necesitamos un castillo, vamos a mirar cómo es la arquitectura. Necesitamos un nivel con muchas plataformas, ¿qué nos vale? Nos vale un acueducto, tenemos uno. Necesitamos un gran portón, tenemos uno, ¿sabes? Podemos imitar esas cosas para que al final, mientras tú estás jugando, lo que ves te puede ser reconocible y tiene una coherencia interna.
No se trata de ser 100% académico, ni tampoco hacerlo mal, pero un 80%, es decir, fijarse en las cosas y trasladarlas con la pantalla con ser fidedigno en un alto porcentaje para dar mucha cohesión, para dar cohesión a todo.
Efectivamente, sobre todo cuando todas esas referencias son muy fáciles de encontrar. Aquí en España pues tenemos muchísimo escrito sobre historia, entonces es fácil dar con esos libros. ¿Cuál es el problema que teníamos? El problema que teníamos es que sobre lo que no hay tanto escrito es sobre mitología. Resulta que teníamos una serie de criaturas, yo tenía claro que quería hacer una especie de bestiario como estos códices medievales que hay, me gustaba mucho ese tipo de ilustraciones y demás, pero claro, quería conectarlo con mitos lo más de aquí posible. Entonces, cuando empecé a buscar, pasaron dos cosas. La primera, que había muchísimos más mitos de los que yo pensaba, y lo segundo, que esos mitos no estaban nada definidos. O sea, según a quien preguntara, según dónde miraras, cambiaba la información. Entonces tuvimos que hacerlo al revés. Mirar, empaparnos de toda esta mitología, de todo lo que sí había algo escrito, y hacernos una idea general y luego aplicar toda esta estética a los mitos para completar las partes que faltaban. Y de ahí fue que empezamos a sacar las criaturas, a darle forma a algunas criaturas que a lo mejor solo tenían una pequeña definición, solo podías saber, tiene 3 ojos, vale, sí, pero ¿cómo es? ¿No? Tiene 3 ojos, pues completábamos en función de lo que el juego nos iba pidiendo para tener un poquito de todo, para tener la variedad que se pretende de un juego, pero a la vez esa conexión con los mitos locales. Pues esto nos dio lugar, pues...
Nos hinchamos de hacer fotografías, hicimos muchísimas fotografías, yo qué sé, pues lo que son capiteles de columnas, detalles, bajos relieves en las iglesias, porque en España, al igual que sucede en Italia y al igual que sucede en Francia, tú te paras en cualquier pueblo y vas a cualquier iglesia y estás rodeado de elementos culturales que están fuertemente arraigados, ¿no?, en la cultura. En cada sitio puedes encontrar muestras de la cultura y del patrimonio, ¿no? Y ya digo que en España hay mucho tema de eso.
Es muy curioso, y luego si buscas criaturas deformes y demonios, pues las iglesias están llenas, ¿no?, de referencias.
La Catedral de León, tú ves el frontal de la Catedral de León, que fuimos hace poco, y está lleno de figuras, ¿no? O sea, nadamos en la abundancia, vamos a decir, ¿no?, de mitología.
Entonces con este juego pasó una cosa muy curiosa, pues tuvo bastante repercusión en la escena. Por aquel entonces era justo cuando salió el juego, era cuando empezaba a hablarse de juegos indie en España. Yo creo que fue un caso, más que del juego, pues hay mucha gente que puede hacer juegos como este y mejores, pero yo creo que tuvo un buen momento, ¿no? Pues salió bien, no me voy a quitar mérito tampoco, pero también tuvo suerte de salir en ese momento. Pero lo interesante no fue lo que pasó en la escena, sino lo que pasó fuera de ella. De repente había medios generalistas, pues periódicos, hablando del juego y hablando de mitos. ¿Y esto qué tiene importante? Lo que tiene importante es que llega gente que no está mirando el medio. Por ejemplo, sin ir más lejos, mi padre vio que hablaban en un periódico y de repente dijo, oh, esto es serio, esto que tú haces.
Noticias, salió en las noticias también.
Entonces, de repente cobró un cáliz que se sale del ámbito de lo que nosotros hacemos, de los juegos retro y todo esto. Pasó un poco al revés de lo que había pasado con el juego de la abadía.
Tiene que nada buscan, o sea, nosotros no fuimos buscando eso ni mucho menos, eso ha sido algo que ha salido como una cosa espontánea, como sale en la diapositiva, también nos pidieron en la Biblioteca Nacional, el Archivo Nacional de la Biblioteca, un ejemplar del juego, se llegaron a hacer conciertos sinfónicos con orquesta, se han hecho tesis doctorales, tesinas, trabajos de fin de grado en el que también profundizan un poco en los temas culturales a través de los videojuegos, es decir, una serie de temas, vamos a decir, colaterales sumamente interesantes que no fueron buscados de ninguna manera, pero ahí están.
Es un poco algo que pasó sin querer, pero tiene lógica que pase, ¿no? Y esto es un último juego que queremos ponerlo, en un caso muy rápido, un juego que volvió a ser muy pequeñito.
Muy localizado.
En el que lo hicimos al revés. Teníamos el juego que queríamos hacer, que era con monstruos gigantes, muy sencillo, un juego de 20 minutos de acción a tope, pero queríamos estructurarlo de una forma y nos aprovechamos un poco pues, del terreno de las Islas Canarias, porque venía muy bien para estructurar las distintas fases del juego, para darme unos buenos cielos azules, que era lo que necesitaba en estos casos, y nos funcionaba muy bien. En ese caso tenía una historia que lo hicimos al revés. Conectamos la historia con el territorio. Necesitaba una montaña. Vamos a ver, ¿qué tenemos aquí? Tenemos el Teide. No, quiero otra, porque el Teide va a estar reservado para la otra cosa. Vale, pues busqué, tenía el monte Tindaya, iba perfecto. Tenía un ejército, pues el ejército español, vamos a buscar cómo eran vehículos que tengan ya unos años del ejército español y vamos a poner esa referencia. Teníamos una presentadora de televisión en la intro, pues vamos a buscar también, ahí tenemos a Ana Blanco, pues para que tú veas una cara, aunque no te está diciendo quién es, pero ya te suena familiar. Cuando lo ves todo junto, de repente es un poco más familiar y de alguna manera es coherente todo lo que estás viendo. Entonces un poco... El resumen que haría de todo esto, lo que nosotros llamamos baja fantasía localizada, medio baja, por así decirlo, es que por un lado, tú si te basas en la realidad, en cosas que tienes cerca, ya tienes garantizada la coherencia interna de lo que estás haciendo. Ya no es estoy en la cueva de hielo y abro una puerta y ahora estoy en la cueva de fuego, ¿sabes? Ahora ya de repente tienes algo donde todo lo que estás contando está conectado con un mundo interno. Por otro lado, tienes detalles implícitos. No tengo que pararme a explicar cómo funciona un mundo que todo el mundo conoce. O sea, no necesito dedicar tiempo a eso. Cuando yo precisamente estoy intentando recortar el mayor tiempo posible para acortar, digamos, la duración de los juegos, está muy bien empezar en un mundo que no tenga que explicar. Luego, por otro lado, tienen la conexión con el mundo real, que es muy interesante, que tú puedas ver algo en un juego y luego en un viaje lo veas. Pues a nosotros nos ha pasado y es muy chula esa experiencia, ¿no? De repente decir, wow, no, es verdad, es que esto era real desde el principio, no es como que quiero visitar, no sé, un mundo de fantasía, pues no lo vas a visitar, ¿sabes? Pero un mundo real sí. Y por último es como un puente cultural, en el sentido en el que tú puedes hablar de un tema, no necesitas profundizar en él, pero tú puedes comentarlo y eso puede hacer que una persona se interese en algo que tú no le estás explicando directamente, pero que está ahí. Entonces, un poco por terminar, lo que decimos es que en nuestro caso, el centro de lo que estamos haciendo, nosotros no pretendemos, no somos historiadores, no pretendemos dar una clase de historia, pero sí que con un poco de documentación, haciendo que esa documentación juegue a la par con el propio juego, con lo que el juego pretende ser, sí que puedes crear un puente para que la gente se interese por una serie de cosas. Y bueno, eso sería.
Indirectamente, pues nada, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. No os mováis, no os mováis. Vamos a invitar a los compañeros de Novelingua a sumarse un momentito al escenario.
Por ahí.
Os quiero lanzar un par de preguntas a los cuatro, antes de abrir el turno por si nuestro público tiene también alguna pregunta. Para enmarcar la siguiente pregunta, sí que os quiero hacer una pequeña analogía. Hay un movimiento ahora en el mundo del vino, que no sé si os interesa, pero bueno, a la hora de hacer vino, hacia intentar cada vez que todos los vinos transmitan mucho el terruño, ¿no? Es como que, bueno, como la gente está harta de beber el mismo vino, porque ha habido muchos años de estandarización, para venderle un vino a un chino o a un americano, pues intento apelar a aquello que conocen. Se han ido ahora a lo contrario, no, yo vendo mi terruño, que cada vino sea único para vender una experiencia diferente. Pero claro, el sentido del gusto es muy directo, muy universal. Vosotros tenéis que explicar unas claves culturales. Tú hablabas de que al tener esa coherencia interna el puente hace de curiosidad, es cierto, pero también hay muchas diferencias en lo que estás contando. Y en vuestro caso directamente al intentar transmitir y que haya un cierto aprendizaje, tienes que presuponer el interés del público, que a veces es mucho presuponer. ¿Cómo intentáis vosotros, en vuestros diferentes casos, salvar esa distancia cultural entre vuestro trasfondo y el de vuestro público?
Me ha tocado a mí el primero, ¿eh? Bueno, nosotros lo que hacemos primero, en el caso de los videojuegos que nosotros creamos por iniciativa propia, porque no he mencionado antes dos videojuegos que son también muy enraizados en un lugar, como son Academia Alborán, pero tiene que ver con lo que voy a decir ahora, y La Búsqueda, que son dos videojuegos hechos aquí en Málaga para el Ayuntamiento de Málaga, sobre Málaga, y los hemos hecho nosotros para un proyecto europeo, pero muy local, ¿no? Es sobre concienciación del medio ambiente. Bueno, pues en los que nosotros hemos planteado, presuponemos el interés del público. Ha sido, yo creo que más fácil presuponerlo en el caso de flamenco, porque en el caso de flamenco hay un evidente interés no solo local, regional, nacional, sino internacional en el flamenco. El flamenco es un fenómeno cultural que ya no tiene fronteras, que es consumido en muchísimos países, que genera incluso un turismo propio en el caso de Andalucía, que está documentado y, vamos, medido económicamente, que tiene una raíz cultural con España, no solo con España. Mucha gente a veces no es consciente que el segundo gran país flamenco del mundo, si muchos estaréis pensando ahora en Francia, no es Francia, es México. Casi nadie lo tiene en cuenta, lo de México. Nosotros tampoco lo hemos tenido en cuenta en el juego, no lo hemos incluido, pero lo dejamos para una posible segunda parte, ¿no? Pero a lo que voy, dices lo de presuponerlo. Mira, fue más difícil presuponerlo en el primer juego que hicimos, que no fue de Málaga. Curiosamente, empezamos con algo que no tenía absolutamente nada que ver con Málaga, en lo que Málaga no salía mencionado en absoluto, que es un videojuego sobre Maruja Mayor, una artista gallega, ya fallecida, de la generación del 27, amiga de Federico García Lorca, de Rafael Alberti, de hecho, novia de Rafael Alberti, amiga de Ramón Gómez de la Serna, Ortega y Gasset, nada malagueño. Y ahí, sinceramente, nos ha sorprendido, te lo menciono porque lo hemos probado en tantos talleres, hemos hecho tantas cosas con este juego que tenemos experiencias con el público, y es que si el juego tiene el suficiente atractivo y tiene la capacidad por la historia, o el personaje en este caso también ayuda mucho, de atraer al jugador, el jugador rápidamente se implica con la historia y pasa a tener, pasa de desconocer por completo personaje y circunstancias a interesarse genuinamente en ello. Es un proceso que está ahí. ¿Que lo comprarían si lo vieran en una tienda? Evidentemente no, porque no lo conocen, en este caso de Maruja Mayo, pero que jugándolo, o sea, quiero decir que es una cuestión ya de marketing, el que lo conozcan o no, jugándolo el interés se genera. Eso puedo dar fe de ello porque lo he visto en muchísimas ocasiones con este juego y es un fenómeno que yo creo que habla mucho de la capacidad que los juegos tienen, cada uno tira lo suyo, para transmitir conocimiento y para formar, ¿no? Y es que el mismo hecho de jugar genera un interés en el contenido. Por ejemplo, en vuestro caso se ve claramente. Estoy convencido que muchos de los que han jugado a Maldita Castilla, que es el que más conozco de los vuestros, el que conozco en realidad, se habrá interesado seguramente por muchos de los fondos, porque además os habéis dado un currazo espectacular y son chulísimos. Y seguramente antes no conocían ni esos castillos, ni esas catedrales, ni esas puertas, ni nada, ¿no? Y es el hecho de jugar, hay una implicación muy diferente a la simple atención en una charla o en una clase estándar, ¿no? de una universidad o de un instituto, da igual, que tiene ese formar parte de, ¿no? Es como esto que dicen cuando la gente conduce, ¿no? Que se siente parte del coche, pues cuando estás jugando te sientes parte del juego y entonces todo lo que vas en el juego te puede interesar. Eso es como...
Yo poco tengo que añadir a lo que han dicho nuestros compañeros de Novelingos, simplemente decir, el videojuego en sí mismo es un vehículo de difusión de conocimiento y tiene, depende del tipo de público, pero entre el público joven tiene muchísimo poder de atracción, muchísimo poder de convocatoria, tiene muchísimo poder del boca a boca, es decir, este videojuego es bueno. Yo soy profesor de secundaria y muchos de mis alumnos que comprenden un rango de edades de 12 hasta 18 años, me encuentro con que conocen el juego, el videojuego de Maldita Castilla, y lo han jugado y dicen, es un videojuego fantástico porque es un videojuego de acción. Pero en el trasfondo de ese videojuego están esos elementos culturales que hemos puesto aquí, que hemos proyectado, entonces hace que los nenes se interesen por ese trasfondo que hay. Entonces, como bien me han dicho nuestros compañeros antes, es un vehículo fantástico de difusión, el formato del videojuego. No sé si quiere añadir algo.
Sí, es que es justo lo que estáis comentando. Yo creo que a lo mejor la cuestión es al final, un juego es un juego en sí. Un juego puede atraer a un jugador por el tipo de juego que es, ya sea narrativo, ya sea de acción, ya sea de construir, ya sea de craftear. Esa es la base de la cosa. En eso es universal un juego y en eso va a gustar en todas las culturas. Lo que viene después es cuando ya tienes ese juego delante, es cuando te entra por los ojos, por el oído, te va entrando toda esa cultura con la que has envuelto el juego, claro, porque en este caso, digamos, lo que importa, lo que transmite, es más el envoltorio que el núcleo en sí del tipo de juego, que a lo mejor sí es algo que ya conocen de antes y no les es para nada extraño.
Sí, en nuestro caso es que hay una diferencia clara, no es, nuestro videojuego no es ocio, ¿no? A lo mejor como y a partir de ahí, sino que necesitamos una predisposición a aprender, ¿no? De eso se lo decimos siempre antes, ¿no? Porque cuando vamos a los talleres, por ejemplo, vamos a hacer videojuegos, o sea, vamos a... Todo encantado, ¿no? Ya le decimos, no, videojuego formativo, ya. Y dice, ostras, ¿qué me va a contar, no? Entonces necesitamos de que ellos sepan que realmente es para formarse. No queremos engañarlo porque tampoco creo que eso sea posible, ¿no? Evidentemente vas a hacer algo de ocio y que luego tengas todo ese trasfondo es genial, ¿no? Pero en nuestro caso es verdad que es formativo, ¿vale? Desde el principio tiene que ser formativo y luego lo que queremos es engancharlo de tal forma para que al final consigan terminar la formación, pues que la terminen todos, por lo menos que la terminen todos, ¿no? y que luego pues puedan sacar el objetivo pedagógico que teníamos al principio, porque al final todo tiene un objetivo. O sea, no se ha hecho el videojuego porque sí, lo hemos hecho para que ellos aprendan hasta aquí, ¿no? Y por lo menos que eso se dé por hecho.
Si me permitís un mínimo de chapa más. Y hablando de experiencia de talleres, nosotros hacemos muchísimos talleres. Aquí estamos haciendo algunos en el Polo, todos los viernes, estamos a estar un año haciéndolos. Los hacemos en bibliotecas, los hemos hecho en colegios, muchísimos. Por ejemplo, con este flamenco está pasando, y también está pasando mucho con los de academia, los que os he mencionado, que hemos hecho de medio ambiente de Málaga, y es que el reconocimiento de lugares entusiasma mucho a los niños, en particular. Yo creo que entusiasma a cualquiera, pero no, como ahora tratamos mucho con niños, genera un entusiasmo genuino, o sea, que lo ves, porque luego yo siempre les hago un cuestionario cuando terminan, y lo primero pregunto, bueno, ¿conocías algo? Y lo primero dice, sí, yo conocía tal, yo esto lo sabía, el otro no. Y nosotros nos beneficiamos de eso cuando hacemos los juegos. Entonces, tampoco cuando decía que inevitablemente, como bromeaba antes, que metemos cosas locales, pues sí lo hacemos. En el caso de ciberseguridad no aporta nada a nadie, pero nos lo aporta un poco a nosotros, porque el hecho de hacer cosas que conoces, no sé por qué, no sé explicar este proceso, pero le pones un cuidado extra, ¿no? Y del mismo modo, cuando tú, por alguna razón, reconoces cosas en un juego, eso aumenta, digamos, por un lado, la respuesta positiva, y yo creo entender también, digamos, lo ves todo de forma más amable. Por ejemplo, nosotros, era evidente en el caso de los juegos que nos contrató el Ayuntamiento de Málaga, que Málaga tenía que salir, pero podríamos haber tomado muchas opciones, haber sacado al Málaga al principio y luego haber tratado temas abstractos. Desde el principio nosotros decidimos no, utilizar realmente el entorno, porque queríamos beneficiarnos de eso. Y perdonad que aumente un poco en la chapa. No sé si os ha pasado con sobrinos, hijos, lo que sea. A mí me ha pasado con mi sobrino. El entusiasmo tremendo con un videojuego de Spider-Man, tan popular de PlayStation, que es una de sus armas para hacer que la gente compre la maquinita, que a él le entusiasma ahora reconocer lugares de Nueva York en las películas que ve. Porque él conoce Nueva York. Él conoce Manhattan, pero ya no solo Manhattan. De la última ampliación reconoce barrios que no solo son Manhattan de Nueva York. Y a él le genera un entusiasmo increíble. Dice, no, sí. Eso es Staten Island. Y dices, Staten Island. No habría dicho a su edad en la vida esas dos palabras, ¿no? Y los videojuegos tienen esa capacidad, y es verdad que poder reconocerlo cuando un jugador reconoce cosas genera un lazo mayor, pero incluso cuando no lo reconoce, como en el caso de mi sobrino, y creo que no es el único, a posteriori no solo mejora tu visión del juego que jugaste, sino te ha dado un conocimiento también, ¿no? Por supuesto, mi sobrino, cuando salga Spider-Man 3, también se lo comprará, evidentemente.
Yo creo que a colación de eso mismo que comentaba, también una cosa que he observado trabajando como diseñador gráfico es que cuando te diriges a un público más joven, ellos reciben un torrente continuo de información nueva, de imágenes nuevas y demás. Y aparte ya de que reconozcas lo que está cerca tuyo, simplemente la repetición le resulta confortable por el mero hecho de que todo parece tan cambiante que nada, no se pueden acoger a nada. Cuando algo se repite, de repente les resulta automáticamente acogedor, ¿no?
No sé si tenéis hijos, pero yo sí, y cuando les cuentas un cuento a los niños, siempre tú les cuentas el mismo cuento porque te piden el mismo cuento todos los días. Si un día le cambias el final, te va a decir, papá, me lo estás contando mal. Y estás intentando evitar que se aburra. No, le estás contando el cuento mal. Es así. Claro, eso les reconforta. Bueno, quiero abrir el turno al público. Creo que es muy bonito todo lo que estáis contando, permitidme que lo diga, porque aparte de lo bonito que es poder utilizar la herramienta de los videojuegos para transmitir nuestra cultura y no quedarnos en que todo tiene que ser un hombre de mediana edad en Nueva York, esta cosa ya muy desgastada, creo que también es muy bonito poder llegar a lo universal a través de lo local, porque al final, si algo conecta a todas las tradiciones culturales en todo el mundo, es que en el fondo todas hablan de lo mismo, solo que cada una a su manera, todas hablan del espíritu humano. Entonces, no hay que renunciar a esos lenguajes propios, porque como bien habéis destacado los cuatro, a través de la curiosidad, a través del juego, siempre se va a salvar el puente de distancia que hay entre el emisor y el receptor con esos códigos diferentes. Quiero abrir el turno a si hay alguna pregunta del público. Levantar la mano. ¿Por aquí? Fenomenal.
Buenas tardes. No, yo por puro corporativismo quería preguntarle a Guizor ¿cómo afrontan la música? Yo soy compositor también, trabajo con Novelingo, me gusta mucho tu trabajo y me gustaría saber cómo habéis hablado de, bueno, pues, de la información, de la documentación y tal. En tu caso, a la hora de comprar una música, ¿cómo la afrontas? Y también basándote en cuestiones que tienen que ver con lo que se está contando en caso de Maldita Castilla, tal, o, bueno, o algo más genérico.
Bueno, yo suelo ser democrático en ese sentido, en el que siempre pregunto al director del proyecto que me dé un marco en el cual yo pueda moverme o el director tenga en mente que debo yo moverme para poder desarrollar la música. Entonces, una vez está definido el marco, por ejemplo, Maldita Castilla, pues me dijo Juan, queremos un arcade que sea del estilo del año 86, 87 como mucho, con un chip de sonido de FM, 6 canales, y el tema pues va a ser un poco mitología medieval española y demás. Vale. Entonces yo tengo ahí dos elementos, uno es el sistema de sonido y otro es qué expresar con ese sistema de sonido. Entonces, a partir de ese marco, pues yo voy elaborando una serie de ideas, una serie de maquetas, a veces son con el piano, a veces son con la voz, a veces son conceptuales y lo acuerdo con él, y cuando tengo algún prototipo, pues yo se lo mando y él lo coloca pues, como fondo en alguna pantalla, en algún gameplay, como se dice ahora, y lo vamos probando. ¿Que funciona? Para adelante. ¿Que no funciona? Pues lo cambiamos. Pero siempre está en constante evolución, porque yo con él es como un partido de baloncesto en el que yo le paso la bola y él me la pasa a mí. Estamos continuamente intercambiando las posturas, las ideas, la construcción, la evolución y todo. Es un proceso muy vivo. En otros casos no es así. Digamos que un director de un proyecto me da un conjunto de normas o de reglas muy cerradas, tienes que hacer esto, 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 incluso me pone referencia. Quiero que sea como el Mario Galaxy de Nintendo, pero tal. Y yo, pues santa palabra, lo que usted diga. Donde manda patrón no manda marinero. Entonces, ya digo, no sé si contesto un poco a tu pregunta. Cada proyecto me dan un poco el marco de condiciones. Los que más cómodo me siento son los que, como Juan, pues me dan mucha libertad. Me dice, mira, ten esto un poco como marco y ya por ahí vas tirando. Entonces, yo voy probando y así pues nos vamos entendiendo un poco. Pero como norma general, hablando se entiende la gente. No sé si contesta esto a la pregunta.
Sí. Perdona, es que en ese sentido también una de las cosas que hablamos a veces de la ventaja de ser un equipo como muy pequeño de dos es que esto no es como que yo le digo, esta es la fase, hazle la música, sino estoy haciendo esto en mitad del proceso y él hace la música y vemos si encaja y si no encaja, a lo mejor hay que cambiar la música o a lo mejor hay que cambiar la fase que también ha pasado. Entonces, claro. Y lo volvemos a testear y vemos que encaja y se hace sobre la marcha, o sea, que no se suele hacer en bloque toda la música del juego, sino en plan cuando llegamos al desarrollar esta pantalla, hablamos de eso, vemos referencias y lo trabajamos juntos.
Claro, pues en vuestro caso, el hecho de hacer un videojuego localizado en una época, ya que trabajáis con una música, con generadores de sonido, tal, no podéis jugar a la tímbrica, ¿no? A los instrumentos de esa época, está mucho más coartado que podría estar un compositor que trabaje con herramientas tradicionales, pudiera grabar o usar sampler y tal. Ahí se te lo cortan de raíz y tiene un doble mérito, seguramente tengas que tirar mucho más de armonía, forma, etcétera, etcétera, ¿no?
Sí, pero teniendo el chip este de FM, que tiene 6 canales, eso no me impide a mí investigar a fondo, pues, no sé, pues, algunas composiciones de maestros españoles, de Manuel de Falla o de Miklos Rozsa, que hizo para películas épicas como El Cid, o también incluso alguna música del Renacimiento o antigua, y jugar un poco con eso. O sea, aunque lo que es el timbre de la música suena a través de un chip, lo que son las composiciones y las formas sí puedo adaptarla totalmente al terreno. Y yo creo que parte de la cohesión que hemos hablado antes en la charla que tiene Maldita Castilla se debe un poco a que esos elementos culturales y tal han ido todos a una, y por eso el juego, casi sin nosotros proponerlo, ha ganado cohesión solo tomando elementos, intentando ser fidedignos, ¿no?, a los elementos que hemos tomado. Eso ya gana un 80% o más.
No tenemos tiempo para más, pero os animo a hacerle más preguntas a los compañeros podéis pillarlos luego en los pasillos. Lo siento, pero la agenda tiene que continuar. Un fuerte aplauso para Daniel, José Luis, Loco Malito y Grifo.
Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros esta tarde.
Thank you. So, last panel of the day, I'm going to invite to here Xavier Rubio Campillo, and Stefano Caselli is not here. He's my colleague from EVPro. He's at home because his knee is it's not broken, but anyway, he cannot join the in-person event. So I think he is connected right now from Italy, but we are starting from you, so I'm going to read the abstract of the panel and also to present you. And the panel is titled Cultural Heritage in School, Discovering the World Through Video Games. And digital games are not usually considered within education and are even considered dangerous for students. It is a common place to be displaced in order to achieve a full revelation of their cultural potential. This also affects how games can address the real world and heritage in general. EVPro Association and Did Patry will share their practical experience in the field to deepen the possible connection between digital games, cultural heritage and school curricula in Italy and Spain. So we are starting from Xavier, and you work for Did Patry, University of Barcelona. Xavier Rubio Campillo is a, oh my gosh, my Spanish is Ramon Icayal. Is Ramon y okay, he's better than me in Spanish. Research fellow and the director of Did Patry Heritage and Learning, a research group exploring new approaches to research and communication about cultural heritage. He also leads Murphy's Toast Games, a small dev studio aimed at creating transformative games designed to promote critical thinking about the past. So, your turn. I'm going to stay here with you, so if you want to, you can speak in Spanish. If you want, I have the translator.
I'm gonna talk in English.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So I have my presentation. Oh, okay. So see how this goes. Where shall I? Okay, so I will start talking anyway. So, yeah, I have these two hats. On the one hand, I'm an academic, okay, and on the other hand, as part of the research somehow, I also create video games that are mostly based on cultural heritage topics, even if we have published some games about other things linked to social impacts, such as the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on teenagers and things like that. Okay, but today we'll be talking about archaeological games, or on more strictly speaking, what do you learn from the past using games, okay? And as a setting, I think it's important to understand that the past, okay, everything that happened in the past, is a main theme in lots of games. Here you have some classical examples, like Red Dead Redemption or Assassin's Creed or whatever, because it's this amazing place that is evocative, it's a mystery. So going inside this past is something that is engaging, and lots of video game creators use it to set the context of their games. The important bit here is that the past that you learn playing these games may not be the real past, let's say, because here the important bit is that you use the past mainly for one reason, is that you don't need to spend money on a franchise, and you don't need to create a new world. If you talk about the Roman Empire, the players will know what the Roman Empire is about. So you can just start talking about Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, or whatever, and players will follow you, right? So it's kind of a free franchise that is quite open to be used in video games, also because it's linked to this idea of the mystery and the romanticism. I would say colonial 19th century archaeology, that is the main one that you see in games, and clearly linked to Indiana Jones stereotypes and topics and tropes. So the idea here is that on the one hand you have this, on the other hand you have educational games, and in the previous talk there were some, let's say, bad words about educational games, and they are true, because the problem is that when you say educational game, it's like it's not a game anymore. I would say that the main issue here is that most educational games are not created by game designers, and essentially they focus on exposition, so lots of text, and no interactivity. One good example of that is the Assassin's Creed educational tour. Yeah, I wanted the, okay, here. So the educational tour, I mean, it's just a guided visit where they removed everything that is kind of fun in Assassin's Creed, and they just left the visit to the 3D models. And it's like, yeah, but that's not what an educational game should be about. So even with a very large budget, this is what it's kind of exposition at the maximum, right? So it's not really a playful experience, it's just visiting these 3D models. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so this is the context where we start. And to us, the important bit here is that any game is a learning device by default. Why? Well, because you have to learn about the context of the game, and you need to learn about the mechanics in order to solve the different scenes. So to advance on the game, if you're engaged by the game, you will have to learn by default. Okay? It's not possible to finish a game without learning about it. So as a consequence, it's a very powerful educational tool if you integrate the content within the language of games, okay? And here we're talking about interactivity, agency, that promotes a lot of empathy, if you want to, about using narrative, but also problem solving, and in a sense, learning about everything that makes the game a game, okay? So the question here is, how can we create games that are engaging at the same time allows us to teach people about something? And I will show you a couple of examples of the type of projects we do with Murphy's Toast. The first one is Ancestors, Stories of Atapuerca. So if you don't know Atapuerca, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's the oldest archaeological site in prehistory in Europe, okay? It's like over 1 million years of occupation in central Spain. And the idea is that, and it's very complex, you don't have a single species, you have Neanderthal, Sapiens, but you have also earlier species. And the question is that in this game, they tasked us to create a game that explored human evolution, and especially that communicated about the most recent findings in archaeology. And this is challenging because Neanderthals, I like a sentence saying, Neanderthals is the species that evolved faster even after they became extinct, because every year you have new findings. So the idea of the Neanderthals we have is way different than the one we had 20 years ago. If you go to games about prehistory, you see all the tropes and stereotypes of the past. Things like, for example, women collected herbs while men are the ones hunting. They were really dumb or not as smart as we are. These kind of things are, or they were surviving. No, they were living, not surviving. It's a different thing. So let's say that all these different tropes is something that we wanted to break using what? Using the science behind what we know about archaeology. Okay, so these are very technical. I mean, you can ask me more about this if you want later, but the idea is that it's a game for secondary education. It was designed for iOS and Android for free. Funded by a private bank foundation and a very small team, 2 people, a programmer, myself, and an illustrator in 9 months. So let's say that the requirements are quite challenging to make a decent game. Okay, next one. Okay, so what did we do with that? It's kind of a survival game. I don't really like the survival game, the idea, because it's this idea, no, but people in prehistory were not surviving, they were living, but yeah, it's the genre, so that's fine. So the idea is that you have a group of Paleolithic people, being Neanderthals or antecessor, and you have to go through different narratives. There are 4 different stories. To become successful in the story, you have to use the different actions that these groups made day by day, things like hunting, collecting resources, making tools, learning, etc., etc. The idea is you have to do this for 2 different species. Homo antecessor they were very old, like 1 million years old, and Neanderthals. To do that, we use some ideas of game design, and these are some of them. One of them is the theme, and because to us it's like, okay, how do you link the player with a Homo antecessor that lived 1 million years ago? So let's say that empathy is kind of hard when you are not even the same species. So we got this idea of transcendence, saying the idea is that when you look at a night in a clear sky, you will see the same stars that these groups were seeing. So in some way that connects. That's this idea of transcendence beyond the individuals, as a group, as a species, or as hominins. Then for the narrative, kind of the same thing. Like if we need to show these different species and they are hundreds of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years apart, how do you connect them? So we did that through oral tradition, the idea of the myth that you were talking about in previous talks. So this idea. So what we had is a sapiens, this elder, talking about the myths of the ancestors, and these ancestors are the other species. So you have this prologue where you have this elder talking, and then the oral myth that this person is speaking is the one that you will be playing. Other ideas, well, the scientific content was, this is exposition, so the lore of other games, in our case, the lore is science. And as per game mechanics, the idea is you have this set of goals, you have to go there and then do this to defeat this huge beast, this animal that you want to hunt. So to do that, you have to chain different actions. So, okay, for this I need the spears. If I want to build the spears, I need the knowledge to do that, but I also need the resources, etc., etc. So this is more or less how it works. And then here you see some example of the mechanics, how everything is organized. And you have a mini game for hunting, because apparently hunting is something that is very important for gamers. And when we did some tests, they wanted to hunt these animals. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, okay. And then for one thing that we try to do a lot of environmental narrative, the idea that you cannot explain everything by text. So if you have a short game, what can you do with that? With, for example, adding that as visual icons or things in the mechanics. One example is this trope that men hunt. We know that that's not correct. So the best way of doing that is just that the icon to hunt in Neanderthals is a woman. So if you do that, you don't need to tell anything to the player. He will or she will, they will assume that Neanderthal women also hunted. And then as some examples of how did we translate science into a game, here in the left you see some ideas from museums and scientific papers, and then on the right, how did we translate that into the game. So you can see here body decorations and also the presence of elderly and kids. That it's something that is not really common in games. The same with the animals that you are hunting, or the ones that are these bosses that you have to defeat. Also the tools, because when you go to a museum, you don't really imagine the tool. I mean, how did they really use the tool? Because the wooden part is missing, right? So you only have the rocks. So this is what we do. And then everything else, because then we wanted to show that they were very complex species. So art, religion, clothing, language, etc. Everything was there in the game. So the impact of this game, it was released 6 years ago already, and it had quite a diverse audience, which was interesting. Teachers using the game in the classroom, but also people that just play games and they liked it. Also lots of teenagers, etc. We had over 80,000 downloads, which is not bad for a game with zero marketing budget. And also because let's say that the mobile gaming market was becoming or has become quite difficult for this type of games for a simple reason. If the game is free, it means that for Apple or for Google, it's not getting any benefit from it, so they don't make it visible because they don't get any profit from it, right? So that was quite, I think that as a scientific impact tool, 80,000 downloads is quite a lot if you think about it. I mean, if you publish a book, you will not go beyond 2,000, and this is a success. So I think we were quite happy about this impact that made this possible, because then it means that lots of other people were interested in this kind of projects, and this is our latest one, Archaeological Research Initiative. So this is quite just a summary of the game. The idea here is that we were contacted by a lab doing science applied to archaeology, and they wanted a game where you learn how to do this. That was tricky because in reality they wanted a virtual reality experience, and it's like, yes, but you cannot do that with 10,000 euros of budget, I guess, or at least I cannot do that with 10,000 euros. So what we wanted to do in the end is something quite different. They came and this is quite interesting because they wanted to, I think that Claudia made at the same point, they wanted a virtual reality experience, like no, not virtual reality, not even 3D. We want to do a 2D game because with this budget, it's not gonna work. And also because it didn't work for the idea they had. The idea is that just, if you think about it, it's like, yes, but if you want to show how archaeology works, maybe a 3D game is not ideal. And in the end, we came up with a different idea, which is a detective game, like a crime scene, using the archaeological context as a crime scene, and then you are the investigator trying to know what happened there. It's heavily inspired by the case of Golden Idol. Actually, when I was playing the case of Golden Idol, I think this would mean for an amazing archaeology game, and then when this team asked us for ideas for a game, I said, I know what we can do, and that was the whole thing. The only difference is that, so the idea is that you collect evidence, then you apply archaeological techniques, and finally you build your narrative, which is actually what an archaeologist does beyond digging in a pit. So this is the example. You have the scene, and then you have to click to collect the words, and that makes for a cheap mechanism, but also it gives you a lot of flexibility, and you can add multi-language support with a reasonable price. So you collect the different words, this is the evidence, and then you apply these methods. You have a library of methods, and then you apply the method to the word. So sometimes it makes sense. For example, if you have a zooarchaeological analysis, if you put there the bones of a horse, you will get an answer. This answer is words that you add to your collection, to your library. If you put that in a bowl, it will say, no, you just spent $2,000 and that's useless. And then finally, you generate the narrative. So once you have the evidence, you have to know what happened there. And the way to do that is to fill the gaps with the words that you collected and see if they make sense. If you do that, in the end, you solve the mystery, and that's what you get from it, the final revelation of what actually happened there on the scenario that you are excavating. And that's all. I have these questions. I think I will leave them here for if we have time for discussion later. So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. So now let's see if Stefano is connected with us. So I can introduce him while we wait for him to. Are you here with us, Stefano? Yeah. Oh, no, nice. It's like, okay. It's like speaking with the dead. Anyway, I'm going to read your bio, and then you can start with your presentation. I think that they have your slides. So, Stefano Caselli, a PhD at the Institute of Digital Games, University of Malta, is a researcher and teacher. His research is focused on how virtual worlds simulate, represent, and transform memory and the past. He has taught video game screenwriting and game design, and now teaches cinema and multimedia. Since 2015, he collaborates with IVI Pro Italian video game program. So Stefano, it's your turn. I hope the slides appear here on the screen. Let's see. No, we don't see the slides, but maybe they are appearing in a while. I hope so. Let's see. Maybe So you share your screen, yeah? Okay, they are working. Okay. They are here. So how is your knee? Just to is it? How is your knee? Are you okay? Are you better? Okay. Okay. Let's see if the slides appear on screen. How's the weather in Italy right now? Here it's quite warm, yeah? Okay. 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 Yeah. Now here you can go to the beach and you can swim. Yes, it's nice weather here. So, as your family? It's like. I don't know. I think they're working. Yeah, they make a sign, so maybe. Oh, now we see the screen. Okay. Yeah, you can start.
Okay, fine. I swear I'll be brief. Even because also because Andrea already told you about what we do at EV Pro, Italian video game program. So I'll be as brief as possible introducing our activities. So EV Pro kind of raises from an awareness, and the awareness that in Italy we are as rich in terms of history and heritage and culture as poor we are in terms of video game literacy and knowledge of how video games can be used to share the heritage and the history of our culture and of our nation. So EV Pro as a project starts with this in mind. Our mission is exactly that of sharing video games as a tool to tell about our past and to tell about our present, to tell about the places and the characters and the histories that we know. And at the same time, our aim is to make institution aware of the fact that digital games are a tool to tell all these things, that a tool that is even more powerful, at least to a certain degree, than cinema and than other media for this very purpose. So EV Pro, at EV Pro, we do a lot of things. Basically, we set up conferences, we do training courses, we organize seminars and lectures, and we are aimed at both general public and institutions, but also at cultural associations, operators, educational operators, so teachers and professors, and even game developers. We also preserve video games, which is an essential requirement for developing future knowledge of the medium. And in a way, we contribute, therefore, to the gaming heritage preservation in Italy, which is another huge issue in terms of awareness of the institutions. Currently, we are looking for a physical place to host our collection. But most importantly, and this will also be the main focus of this presentation, we make research. So we update two different national databases, one dedicated to Italian stories and locations from a video game perspective, and the other of published video games set in Italy or representing Italian culture and heritage. And at the same time, we facilitate contact between developers and film commissions or institutions that could help them raising funds or funding funds, or alternatively make research on the territory and on the cultural heritage that they kind of rule. At the same time, we provide support to game developers. We draft an announcement. We manage commissions for all the institutions that are interested in using video games to share and promote the heritage. And last but not least, because this is the very focus of this presentation, we organize educational programs and didactic path, so to speak, and workshops, both theoretical and practical, that target both primary and secondary school students, as well as private individuals or game developers or even educational operators. And this is our project dedicated to education. EV Pro Edu is a set of different courses and learning paths that aim at different subjects, that aim not only at different subjects, but at a different target of people. So today in this presentation, I'm going to present three main projects that we deal with within EV Pro Edu. The first is Press Start to Learn. Press Start to Learn is in English is video game literacy at school, and is a project aimed at secondary school students and teachers. So the action of this project is twofold. On the one hand, we deal with students and engage them in not only in an introduction of digital games as a medium, but also in the designing of a video game concept dealing with their heritage, as I will say in a few seconds. On the other hand, we deal with teachers because we are aware of the fact that to make games, to put games into the school, into educational programs or into the educational environment, you can not only act upon students. Of course, you also have to, in a way, penetrate into teachers and families as well. Of course, families would be even harder to reach, but teachers are there and they are ready to learn, so to speak, even if they resist in some way to the adoption or to the use of this tool that they know less than cinema or other established media. For what concerns the students, we firstly deal with a sort of introduction of digital games as a medium. We speak about digital games and transmedia storytelling. So addressing how games are in dialogue with other media, and they are in an intricate and complex web of languages and of references, so they are practically involved in the comprehension of other media as well, and this is very good for multidisciplinary paths and educational purposes. At the same time, at the end of this sort of introduction to digital games, we engage students with the designing of a video game concept. We decided for Press Start to Learn to deal with a video game concept and not a playable prototype or a full-length playable video game, as we will see in other projects we do, due to the fact that designing a video game and not making it playable or coding it leads students to have more freedom for what concerns the idea that they have or the in a way how big the project the video game concept could be. So they are entirely free to fly with their fantasy, and they only have to design and to craft a game design document, which is usually around 30-40 pages long at most. The main purpose of the path dedicated to students is to make them work on designing a video game that could tell their heritage. They usually declare this on different disciplinary contexts and different subjects, but they usually use video games to learn something about the heritage that they can learn or that they can visit or that they can explore and that usually surrounds them. At the same time, for what concerns teachers, Press Start to Learn consists in a series of workshops and lectures that aim at spreading and sharing gaming literacy. Of course, teachers are usually willing to learn new ways to engage their students, but they are usually almost entirely ignorant in terms of gaming literacy. So our didactic path deals with introduction to digital games, to basics of game design, to how a game work, how games can tell stories, if video games are actually narrative devices or texts, which is a thing that for us can be something that we know very well, but that teachers are not entirely used to understand and to accept. And later on, during the same didactic path, we usually make teachers play games in class. So we involve them in a sort of shared play session in which we play certain digital games and make them reflect upon the didactic value or potential of the games that they just played. Because it's, as a matter of fact, teachers usually don't play, at least if they are from a certain generation. Certain generations play less than others, of course. So the first edition of this project was held 1 year ago, 2 years ago, maybe 2022, 2023, and the second one is currently or ongoing. And this twofold path, aiming at both teachers and students, for us is the only way to actually penetrate the learning environment and to get digital games into the school. Because otherwise, if you work only with students, of course, teacher would never accept that digital games can be a tool, a learning tool. And vice versa, if you work only with teachers, students will never be engaged with the complexity of the medium, because even students, even if they use video games a lot more than their teachers, they are not aware of gaming literacy at all. I mean, they do not know how the medium is complex, or how the medium can be risky, or what are the potentials of the medium. These are all things that, of course, must be learned, and not only they do not automatically filter through the experience of play. So here there are some photos. That the guy there is Andrea, and these are some pictures from the play sessions. Of course, both with the teachers, we make a collective play session. With the students, we engage them with group play. I mean, they use some gaming computers or tablets, and they play in little groups, and then they make analysis, a sort of brief document and paper that they have to compile after they have to fill after having played the game. These are other pictures of the class and the play sessions, and these instead are some excerpts from the game design documents that the students crafted at the end of the didactic path. So as you see here, these are de facto some screenshots of the games that they designed. These are, of course, some very good pictures in which there's a character study, and here they planned and designed the whole user interface with characters on screen. These here are some comments by the students. As you see, they are generally not only engaged and enthusiastic by having used games within school, which are two things that rarely communicate, but most importantly, they learn how games can be way more as a textual tool, as a device, than what they usually expect or are used to think. Playground is the second of the projects that I want to present you, and Playground is instead aimed at primary school students only, not teachers, only primary school students. The difference here is that in this project they not only design digital games, in this case visual novels, but they make them playable. So if you go on the website of Playground, you will also find the visual novels that the primary school students engaged within the project crafted, and they are actually playable and even pretty cool, of course, unless you focus yourself on the fact that they are designed by primary school students. So aesthetically, they are kind of rough, so to speak, but you will see some pictures in some moments. And in this sense, crafting a digital game for primary school students becomes a way to discover the world around them. So we ask them to design these visual novels that tell the heritage that they already know. So they use the digital games to explore the world that surrounds them. And these are some pictures. Last but not least, Urban History is Reloaded, but I am running out of time. Urban History is Reloaded is an artistic residency. So here we had another target, and the target was game developers, so game designers, game artists, and game programmers. We asked them and we followed them and supervised them as they designed a game based on a specific area of the city of Padua in Italy. It was a 5 weeks long residency, and during the residency, they designed a playable prototype of a mobile game, which is Most Scene, and that is entirely free to download from the website of the residency. Here, as well as in the other projects, the game became a tool to explore the world that surrounded them and to tell, so to speak, to retell the experience of the city that they were having. I think I'm done. So I thank you very much for your attention. I've heard some confused voices, but I hope everything is fine there as well. So
Thank you.
thank you. And of course, we have some further space for discussion or questions or whatever.
So I have a question for both of you, then we ask the public if there's a question. I start with, what do you think, Stefano, and what do you think of the use of, about the use of commercial games in school instead of applied educational games? Because it's something we discuss a lot with Stefano, with teachers we usually meet, but maybe you could tell us. Maybe you can start with Xavier.
So my experience is that any kind of video game, it's challenging in a school because logistically it's not easy. Like, okay, commercial games, but that means that you need PCs that should be fine and that you need lots of them, but also how do you buy, as a school, how do you buy licenses of a video game in Steam, for example? That's not going to happen. Also, the climate is not ideal because right now, at least, for example, in Catalonia, we have a huge discussion about that because there's these PISA results that are these European markers of, I don't know, knowledge of in secondary and primary schools. Catalonia performed really bad, and then they said that they said that everything is because of the screens, because previously they bought a screen for every kid. So it's like it's not. So there's no planning on how do you promote digital literacy, and as a consequence, anything that will mean kids playing in the screens will not be easy, at least to sell, because you have to sell that in order to get the budget. So to me, for example, either, first of all, you have other types of games, and that's something that you should really think about. Like, analog games are way easier to deploy in the school. And the other thing, as I said in one of the slides, if you have the budget and you do that, and that's fine, lots of, or some teachers do that, then you really need to think about what you can get from the commercial game. And my point, I think, is that the best thing you can do is to critically analyze the game. So you pick one game and then you say, okay, let's promote digital literacy and knowledge of, for example, history, playing a game that is clearly wrong because it's not, I mean, the main point is not educational, and then try to analyze from what you learn in a school to what you see in the game, what is wrong. And I think that works quite well, and it's kind of an interesting take on how to use game. Otherwise, it's a critical, and I don't think it's going to work very well.
Stefano, what about you?
I agree pretty much on everything. I mean, accessibility is a huge problem in terms of commercial games. Not only because commercial games are hard to take into school, but also because commercial games ask their user to, in a way, pay for access because they are commercial. So in a way, even if you critically analyze some games, the students and the public that you have would find harder to deal with those games. Instead, serious games or educational games are already designed with accessibility in mind. So they are being made not for commercial purposes, they are way more accessible even for your public, and not only within the school, but even at home. They can play whenever they want. Instead, if I say them, hey, play Assassin's Creed 2, they have to buy a PlayStation or a good computer, and they have to buy the game. So it's double purchasing stuff that, of course, it's harder and harder, or at least less accessible than educational games. Of course, on the other hand, there's another thing to consider concerning commercial games. Commercial games are the ones that people know and play the most, of course. So when you critically analyze them, it's necessary to deal with them. Otherwise, we do not have to forget, for example, that teachers that are part of our public, part of our students, are also parents. And these parents witness their children playing with Fortnite or with commercial games all the time, basically. So educational games are games that are usually outside of the media diet of users. So the action here is twofold. On the one hand, let them know that even commercial games have potential or complexity to discover. And on the other hand, even to learn that even serious games or educational games, or however you may call them, can be put into the media diet of people, so that they exist, that they have potential, and they are pretty complex and effective as educational tool, as much as their commercial counterparts, at least.
Okay.
So, but this is just a restatement of what Xavier just said, because he was entirely right.
Is there any question from the public? I think it's almost dinner time here, so maybe. But if there's a question, we have time for another question. Otherwise, we can. Oh, there's a question over there.
I have one, I think particularly focused maybe more Xavi, because you're a university professor, right? You work with a university, so I would be very interested in how you perceive that. Of course, this is a long-term thing, but do you perceive that, is it possible that we could actually, do you see if it's possible that we integrate video games to, let's say, a university curriculum? Like, how is it looking right now, and what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a different beast than high schools. I think it's feasible. You mean commercial video games or any kind of game?
Any kind of game.
Okay. You can do, I mean, I teach in a Master's of Cultural Heritage, and I teach Digital Heritage. And a couple of the sessions I do are about games. So I do streaming on Twitch, and then we test some games, because we don't have computers that actually can run these games. And because I was telling about this problem of buying the licenses. But I think one important thing is that this idea that younger generations are digital natives is not, I mean, okay, they are digital natives, but not all of them. I would say most of them do not play games. Or maybe they play one game. So one thing that's kind of tricky is that if you introduce games at the university level, you have to be aware that some of them will not like it, or some of them will not be good at it, and if you're not proficient in the game, may not be the best learning tool. So that's something that you have to take into account. Streaming worked quite well, because I was surprised, but it's true that they were 22, 21, 23, and a higher percentage of them watch games by streaming than they play games. So lots of them, they don't play games, but they watch streaming. So it was quite interesting. I do it every year and works quite well. And also, you can introduce that. I think it works, and it can do. I also do that for the masters in secondary teach. So the one that secondary teachers need to do, the masters in order to teach, it works well. We test some games. Most of them are web-based, things like that. And also, as part of the assessment, they have to create a Twine interactive game. I don't know if you know. Twine works very well for assessment, because they learn how to create a game. Very simple. Even if you don't know how to program, you can create something and focus on the narrative. So it works quite well. Having said that, most of the staff in universities will not play games, and they will not like that. So that's the other thing that maybe, so okay, you can do that, but you need teachers that already know games, and this is not literature or cinema. Lots of teachers will not do that. So I would say that yes, but you need more literacy from the teachers in order to do that. But yeah, definitely, as I said, it's a powerful learning tool. So if you create or you use the right games, it's an amazing resource.
Yeah, once more, I agree with that. I was for me as well, or?
Yeah, as well. If you
There's
have
another question.
Yeah, there's a question beside you.
Let's listen to the answer first.
Sorry.
So, do you have another question?
Yes, but he also has an answer to my question.
Sorry.
So it would be amazing.
It's hard to. There's a ghost there, people here. So.
No worries. No worries at all. No, I mean, I agree with what Xavier just said. The fact I've been using games in university, but of course that was academies of fine arts or colleges interested in game design and stuff like that. So I agree on the fact that in university is even harder than in secondary school, because introducing games in university requires a higher degree of proficiency or of literacy from both students and teach and professors. So it's harder and harder the higher on the level of education you get. So basically, yes, it's hard, but many universities already deal with it. Not only game studies universities, such as those in Malta or in Finland and stuff like that, but even media studies universities. I've been witnessing courses in which teachers, in a way, suggested students to play games as well as well as playing as watching movies as part of the reflection on a specific topic. So it is possible, but of course is more possible in certain specific and learning environments, and it's harder and harder in, for example, a history university. In that context, would be harder and harder to get into games, even because they are way more complex than other media. So it's understandable.
So, last question from Cleo.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask actually both of you, I guess, whether you observed any differences in how the students were interacting with each other when they were working with games vis-a-vis working with other materials, but I don't know if you have a reference point for that, because if you're not in that classroom regularly. I was just curious because I've heard a lot about, games fostering social inclusion and stuff, but you also mentioned just now about how not all the young people now are digital natives across all games. So I was just curious if you had any particular observations that stuck out at you.
Do you understand?
May I? Okay, I actually teach I teach cinema and multimedia in a secondary school, so I could watch how do they react differently by watching a movie or by playing a game. I could swear that playing games in class it's way more chaotic. I mean, they tend to be more noisy, they tend to be more dispersive, so it's a learning environment that's harder to get into. But this is not a bad thing. I mean, is the good chaotic thing. It becomes a sort of learning environment in which they constantly help each others. For example, overcoming an obstacle in game, in which students that are more skilled with games go to others and tell them, "Hey, this is something that I've already experienced in another game," and stuff like that. And the main difference between digital games at school and cinema at school, for example, is that cinema, such as books and other media, traditional media, tend to be perceived as passive. And you immediately notice this thing in class. I mean, when they engage with movies, when they watch a movie in class, they are entirely silent. They are entirely, in a way, mesmerized within the screen. They are there and they are just witnessing something. So there's no exchange between them. There's no dialogue between them. You have to build the dialogue afterwards. After having watched the movie, you can do a debriefing phase in which you engage them with a dialogue and a debate on what they have just witnessed or they just watched. In games, this debate phase is in a way intertwined with the play experience. So the class becomes way more engaging as a learning environment, and they constantly debate over what they are doing. So as a learning environment is way more chaotic, but is even more vibrant and less passive than when they watch movies or read books. So it's good for a reason, but of course it's a little more complex to in a way to rule as a teacher. So this is something I can witness.
Yeah, I think it's more engaging, but it's more chaotic. One example is, so one of the PhD students I supervise has a project called Play Utopia. And Play Utopia is a non-formal education context. So it's not the classroom, but it's a place where teenagers go after school. And he's doing that in one of the poorest districts in Barcelona. They voluntarily go to this game club. Most of them are first-generation immigrants coming from Pakistan, Morocco, etc., etc. the only thing they have in common is games. They like games, right? And they tend to play PUBG, this kind of game, Fortnite. But in this club, they learn how to play other types of games. And the formula that Kevin, who is a PhD student, does is they play in like 3 or 4 every computer because they don't have a budget for more computers. But it's kind of a good thing because they interact with each other. So it's this idea of they play and then they talk about it because the format, the media allows that. And with a movie, you probably cannot do that as well as with a game. So yeah, definitely I agree that for interaction, social inclusion, etc., can be a very powerful tool.
So thank you. I think that's all for today. Thank you to our guests, to Stefano and Xavier, and see you in Italy, Stefano. Bye bye. Ciao ciao. Thank you. Thank you. And so, see you tomorrow for the track number 3 and number 4. Thank you. Have a good night and bye, bye, bye.